Excellent. Welcome to class. It's 6:02 by my watch and 6:04 by that clock. So we're going to get started. Tonight is Property Management Mastery. Upcoming classes, which I cannot see anything on this screen because of the glare, so I'll stand over here. Next week is Solving Tenant Challenges. So everything that you hear tonight when you're like, oh, but what do I do if a tenant does? That's next week. It's not tonight. So if you have questions about what to do, you can definitely ask tonight, but that is not the main goal of tonight. The following week is your third Nomad property, which James is teaching. James, I assume this is about your third Nomad property. Want to tell us about that? As soon as you turn on the mic.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. It is about your third Nomad property. Basically, it is for people that are considering their third property. And we go over the math of what happens if you stop versus what happens if you continue. And then we go over all the things you need to know for property management when you have tenants that are moving out. So tenant turnover stuff, which I think a lot of it is what you covered tonight, but we're going to go into it specifically for nomads.
Nice. You can leave that on because you're going to have to talk again here in a second.
Okay.
And then the week after that is James's birthday party. James, are you coming to your birthday party?
I am not coming to my birthday party. And it's not like a malicious not coming. My son's graduating from college. So I will be in Tempe.
Yeah. So James won't be there. We are still finalizing the destination, but we are trying to do somewhere else besides Ryan's. So we will let you know next week where that's going to be. And then the following week, which is May 16th, is just $25 more. So if you guys have ever analyzed a deal and you plug in and you look at the rent kind of comparison between how much 25 and 50 and 75 more adds to your actual bottom line, it makes a big difference. I'm pretty sure that's what you're going to show us.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. There's going to be more stuff than just the $25 though, because it's going to be like
$30 too.
No, we're not doing $30.
Oh, okay.
That's too much. We'll do $26 and $25 just to make sure. But in all seriousness, we're going to do $25 and I'm going to go over rules of thumb. So when you're out in the fields and you kind of know kind of what a property is, and you say, hey, I think I could actually get a small premium for this, you'll know what that means, and you'll be able to do some crazy math in your head like we do up here. And then also, we're going to go over the impact of it, not just on a single property, but on an entire portfolio, and how that can actually impact your ability to buy properties faster and growing your net worth and paying down things. If you can get 25 more and you use it to pay down stuff, there's going to be a lot of really cool stuff in that class.
Nice. Awesome. And so then, I don't know how far out we're scheduled. We're scheduled through at least the end of May, and then James and I tonight have agreed to talk about what's coming up, I think in June and July and probably August. And so if you guys have classes, for those of you that are new, you all fill out a sheet and say, hey, these are the classes I'm interested in. But if you have ideas for classes or things that you would like us to teach, we would like to hear that now. Like if there's stuff that you have either missed and really want to see, or something that we've never taught that you want to see, now's your chance to tell us what you want to see.
Yeah, and for those that are coming here and check stuff off on the boxes, we have like almost everything on there we've done at least once and we have a recording of. So if you missed one and you really need it like tonight or tomorrow night, then all the videos is on the podcast and on the website. So, but if there's stuff you need live or stuff you want to see that's not on there, please let us know right now.
Yeah. So what do you guys want to see? Anything that's compelling that you want to see as we come into summer season, which is generally summer season. Huh?
That's summer season.
Yep, summer seasoning. Yeah, Tammy, you need the mic to talk. Nobody has any suggestions. Now's your chance.
I'd like to see the asset protection again.
There's a vote for asset protection on the floor.
Sorry, Brian.
Fantastic.
She is sorry.
She's sorry. Me too. Does anyone else want to see asset protection?
Wow,
Few
this is the
people.
first time we've not had like everyone's
Three
hand
people.
go up.
I know. Usually when we say, do you want to see asset protection, everyone's like, yes! Because this is one of the few classes that is not actually publicly available on the podcast. So the only place you can get it is here. So.
Oh wait, we're gonna do a new vote. I'm
Sure.
sorry. The question
The
was, what's the
question-
content?
Yeah, so the content of asset protection is you can hold your real estate in many different ways, right? You can hold it in your personal name, but like if you own 10 properties and I go search your personal name in public record, I can see that you own 10 properties. That kind of makes you a target. So asset protection is how to protect yourself from people who might want to come after you, whether that's tenants or you run into someone in a car accident and you hurt them and they're like, oh, you own all sorts of properties, we're coming after you, right? So it's basically the structure and the strategies to set up your entities so that you are protected asset-wise.
All right, there are now 2 votes.
Well, there were 3 before.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Would anyone
Wait,
else
wait,
like to see asset protection? Yeah. And the class that goes along with that typically is there's asset protection where I simply teach asset protection strategies, and then there is a class which is the actual form side of asset protection, which I don't know if we need to teach, but we can.
I think I get all of June off now.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah. There was another class you and I were talking about doing maybe a full day. Delio, do you want to talk about that?
Go ahead.
So Brian wanted to do a full day class.
James was prodding me to do a full day class. What was that class about? How to find tenant buyers for lease options?
It's basically starting a business, becoming like a deal maker. When we kind of like think about the partnership class, becoming the deal maker. And you were talking about giving everyone all the forms for a full day class and then doing some special stuff on how to go do what is probably either the best or the second best strategy in today's market right now.
Yeah. How many of you guys don't know what a lease option is? Don't be shy. Perfect. At least one person. She just helped everyone who didn't raise their hand who doesn't know. So a lease option is basically if James wanted to buy a house, right? And he's like, hey, I've got some money saved for down payment, but I can't get a loan. He could come, and the business model is that he could come to me as an investor and I'd say, okay, let me qualify you. And then he's going to put some money down up front as an option fee. I'm going to go buy a house that he picks, and he's going to live in it and rent it until he's actually able to buy it, right? Until he's able to fix his credit or whatever's wrong, get his loan, and then he can purchase the house directly from me at a preset price. So that business model where you go find those tenant buyers, what's amazing is if you went and found a tenant buyer and James had 10% of the down payment available, he can give me that 10%. I can use it to help buy the house. Right? So I don't actually need 20%. So there's a whole business model there that is finding tenant buyers, either selling them in some sense to an investor, right? Much like you would wholesale a deal, you're in a sense wholesaling the tenant buyer.
Which is the deal in this case, because in our marketplace, it's
Right.
really hard to find undervalued deals. We have our inventory is 10% less than it was last year in Northern Colorado. And prices are way up, and the cash flow on properties is not nearly as good as it's been historically because rents are suppressed and interest rates are rising.
Right. You
So,
typically get a higher rent with a tenant buyer than you would otherwise.
so the tenant buyers actually make the deal.
Yes.
You can like force yourself to find deals by finding a tenant buyer that is
Yes.
good enough, and those are easier to find than the deals right now.
Yes. I own houses that I otherwise would not own because there are tenant buyers involved. So, and that's both based on age and quality of house and based on price of house, right? You can do higher priced houses with the tenant buyer because they lose their option fee if they don't buy it from you.
It's probably the wrong class to ask this at, but how many people raise your hand if you're interested in wholesaling? Okay, so all the people that raised your hand and are interested in wholesaling, the market right now makes it really hard to wholesale. So the strategy to do it is actually to find the tenant buyers and wholesale the tenant buyers, or put them together with a deal and do that.
Yeah. So now that we've told you what that class is, whether it's a day-long class or a 2-hour class or a couple 2-hour classes, how many people would be interested in tenant buyers and lease options and that kind of stuff? And asset protection. Excellent. Asset protection, you just put $20 right up here on this table on your way out the door. And if there's enough, then we teach it. Lashana.
I know one time we talked about.
Oh, wait, I got to get the mic. I'm sleeping on the job here. Yeah, I know, I'm slacking. Here you go, Sean.
That's all I had to say.
Boom.
We talked about doing like a field trip to Journey Homes or something like that, and going to new builds.
They probably want me to do that.
Really?
And
Because it seemed like it
I'm
just never got scheduled.
I'm still,
So.
yeah, I'm still interested in doing that, even though
Nice.
I prefer already built homes.
Nice.
Yeah, we probably should do that.
Anything else you guys are in need of or don't know you're in need of and just want to hear? The other classes that we've done that we talked about doing were, we did a couple classes titled arguably the best class of the year, where James and I teach like small 20-minute topics, and there's like 4 of them in a night. Another class that we did was hot seats, where I basically rake you over the coals in front of everyone else in front of the room to help you basically build your real estate portfolio and make sure you're on the right track to actually meet your goals, which is a lot of fun.
Just as an aside, there's
Come on, how many of you guys were here the last
Well,
time we
I
did
was going to
that?
point out that there's no one here who actually was in the hot seat. Okay, I'm sorry. I take that back. There's only one person here. Everyone else stopped coming after
That
the
is
hot
so
seat.
not true. Yeah, where's Joe? He would tell you that it was an amazing experience.
That's good.
Yeah. So anybody else have any suggestions? Anything else you want to see?
Look at the list again, because when I
Oh, yeah.
filled it out, I don't remember.
Yeah. So if you do, just let us know after class. No big deal. We don't have to know right now.
And or email.
or email, or you can call James.
No, don't call me.
Just
Call
call
Brian.
him. Don't call Tammy. Call James. So tonight is Property Management Mastery. We're going to do a quick round of intros where James is going to have to be on his toes and move the mic. Just tell us your name, why you're really here, kind of what type of investing you're doing. And then question of the night, just pick one. Please don't answer them both. Otherwise, we'll be doing intros for a long time. Either what is the hardest part of property management for you, because that's what we're going to talk about tonight, or for next week, what challenges have you had with a tenant that you'd like us to cover next week when we cover solving tenant challenges? James, why don't you go first?
I'm James Orr. The hardest part about property management is finding the time to do property management.
Nice.
I'm Mary Mickelson, and I'm just trying to learn as much as I can about everything.
I'm Deborah Trujillo, and we just started investing. We have 2 properties now.
John Trujillo, and I think the hardest part for me so far is just finding tenants for the properties.
I'm Ethan Giller, and all my properties are out of state, so that's the hardest part for me in terms of management.
Hi, Donna Shout, and my hardest problem so far is just not being so empathetic to the tenants that have the hard cases, the hard stories, and they have great financials, but something else is wrong, and so that, for me, that's difficult because I have a big heart, so.
I'm Lori Schmitz. I'm just here to learn some more about property management.
Awesome.
I'm Lynn Quire. Most of my investments are also out of state, and I have property managers managing them, and I have problems managing the property manager.
So that is also not this class. That is a completely separate class as well. But if you have questions, definitely ask tonight, because that's, James and I tried to teach us selecting your property manager and managing your property manager class, and that's basically like 4 hours of material. We taught it in like 2.5. You can actually split that up and teach that again. Yeah.
My name is Cindy Cliff, and I've had a lot of experience in real estate financing and et cetera, and I want to see where I could best fit back into this market. So I'm here to learn as much as I can.
Awesome. Welcome.
I'm Craig Johnson. My wife and I have properties out of state, like Lynn, and just one here, but buying another one, and I think we want to run those ourselves, the ones that are here.
I'm Josh, buy and hold investor, and a topic I'd like to see you cover is tenants as roommates and how that affects things.
Tenants as roommates. Followed by family as roommates.
Yeah, don't do family. That's my advice. My name's Tammy Orr, and I'd go with James with time. And yes, I'll echo that advice. Don't rent to family members. It usually doesn't end well.
I'm Nick Augustine, nomad investor. Hardest part is probably just everything, the confrontation, the finding tenants, finding the time. So all balled into one creates one kind of big monster.
Yeah, and for those of you that weren't here last week was the birthday party. The 2 weeks before that were tenant screening and the tenant screening workshop. So if you missed that, the entirety of how to find great tenants, how to screen them, and actually practicing in class, that was those 2 weeks. The tenant workshop, is that the one that didn't record? So tenant workshop, unfortunately, didn't record. We had technical difficulties for some reason, but it's definitely James's fault because it's his equipment. So that settles that. But we're not technically covering that. But again, if you guys have questions tonight, we'll take any and all questions. So go ahead.
My name's Barbie Thalen, and I would say the hardest part for me is when it gets time for the pre-leasing, and then you kind of panic, like, oh, just
not charge the rent we should, and you're just trying to get the tenant in there. So
Yep.
I think that's the hard thing for me.
Yeah, my name's Bob Phelan, and I would say one thing that we've been wrestling with is if we make improvements, how much can we charge more in rent? And is this improvement, can we justify making this improvement by the rent increase that we're potentially would get?
That's a really good question. I'm not going to cover it tonight, but please ask it again at the end so that we can have that discussion, because it's a good discussion. And I actually just had this discussion right before this in another meeting, which is they're like, do we put air conditioning in or do we not? And how much more can we charge? And when do you make that decision? And is it really worth it? So it's a super compelling discussion.
I'm Caesar.
What's up? I haven't seen you in like 3 years.
I know. I'm a nomad investor, and I think the hardest part is advertising, especially with Craigslist. It's not as popular as it used to be. It's kind of hard to find tenants the way you thought it a couple years ago.
Use James's favorite. Use Zillow instead.
You should use Zillow, actually.
I'm Curtis. As a beginner investor, I haven't had the opportunity to master any property management yet, so that's why I'm here.
Nice. And if I could get everybody to just put their phones on silent, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Cray. We are just trying to get started with our first investment property, and it's going to be probably out of state. So we'll probably be using a property manager.
What state?
Iowa.
Where in Iowa?
Cedar Rapids, Iowa City area.
I grew up in Eldora.
Oh, okay.
Went to Iowa State, so familiar with. Uh-oh, he's a Hawkeye. Get him out of here. Skip him. Come on, we can
I'm
be
Mark,
friendly.
and I'm a Hawkeye.
Oh man.
Yeah, new at property management. The hardest part is delivering bad news and trying to find a tenant that doesn't have pets.
So by trying to find a tenant that doesn't have pets, you actually eliminate about 80% of your market, right? Even in this market. So my advice is that you accept pets, you have an extra deposit, you charge pet rent, and out of all the times that I've done that, it's been mostly fine, right? So occasionally you're gonna get a bad pet owner. I actually used to do pet meet and greets before I would actually approve their application. So that's one way that you can kind of deal with that, but you do have a much harder time.
This one's on a house that I'm managing for somebody else. So.
Ah, you don't have the control then. Yeah, perfect.
I'm Casey Opog. I'm really new, so I'm just here to learn.
Awesome, welcome.
I'm Gregory Anderson. And Casey.
Awesome.
I'm Lashana, and doing this every day, the hardest part for me is not screaming at people. And I have a heart, but I'm also all about black and white. And so if you can't read English, and I don't know how to help you. So I don't know, whatever the opposite of her answer is.
Hi, my name is Scott. I think the hardest thing for me is reducing the turnover time from between tenants.
That's a good one too.
I don't have a mic. Are you starting 60 days ahead?
45.
Yeah, we'll talk about how far to start ahead and how to minimize the time as well.
Did you see my article for 10 months? 10
Yeah.
months leadway?
Yeah, what's this? My favorite color.
So on that, I think the issue I struggle with, though, starting that early is I have so many people that want to see the property right away.
Yeah.
I've got some videos and
we'll talk about
pictures
that.
and
You know
such,
what the
but
number one best thing to get someone to sign an extension is? Having other people come and try and rent their property. What? Because you tell them, hey, at 60 days, I'm showing it. And if you haven't signed and someone else signs, you're out. Guess what? Signed, right? Very, very compelling reason to actually do that.
My name's JB. I'm an agent for 13 years, but I've had a property since 12, and my hardest part with that is just treating it like a business. And now I'm closing on a 3-unit property on Friday, so I'm going to have
Nice.
4 doors, we'll say, and so I need to be more business oriented in how I handle my tenants.
Nice. Congrats on the property. That's awesome.
Hi, I'm Elaine. I've been doing this for about 10 years. I own and manage my own properties. I guess one of the hardest part of property management for me is when 3 friends move in, and a couple months later there's 2 friends and 1 enemy. So.
That's what happens with 3 of anything.
And so I struggle between 3 separate leases or 1 lease with sub-clauses. And so, yeah, that's like a huge headache for me right now.
So I'm not going to cover that in depth tonight, but I would highly suggest it's always 1 lease with them being jointly and severally responsible for rent. That way, one of them moves out, they're all still responsible.
Yeah, I have that clause.
Yeah, and so I will let them typically, I've had this situation a bunch of times where it's 3 people and then 1 wants to stay, 2 wants to stay, whatever it is. And I'm like, I just tell them, great, here's your lease. If you find another roommate and they pass my application process, I will just simply change the lease for you, right, for a small fee. But that's the easiest way, in my opinion, to handle it. You know, the other way is, well, you guys can all stop paying rent, or one of you stops paying their share, and guess what? You're all getting evicted. But I have that conversation up front when we sign the lease, right?
Yeah.
One of you decides you're not friends anymore, right? If you preamble that up front, it definitely helps.
I do, and it's in the lease as well. It's just a lot of headache and hassle.
Yeah, no doubt.
So with that. And so the pet thing, I wanted to mention that quickly in passing. I always have them send a picture of the pet to me so I could approve of it up front. Like
Yep.
it was like a huge, I don't know, wolfhound, and obviously not.
Right.
That kind
Can't
of
have a
thing.
miniature pony unless
Yeah.
it's a service animal.
Hi, I'm
Legit.
Sean. I've got 1 buy and hold so far. Hardest part for me is probably just dealing with all the sob stories you get from applicants. You know, trying to guilt you into letting you say live in your house type thing.
I'm Kevin, and I currently don't have any investments, so I'm just here to learn.
I am Caroline. I do have an out-of-state property, and I'm up against raising the rent on a really good tenant right now, so that's one of my questions.
My name is Elijah. A problem in the past was just finding well-qualified tenants, so I think the 2 classes you taught on tenant screening were very helpful.
Great. Look who
I'm
else
Brian
is here.
Lovegrove. It has been a while, but I'm a private lender, and since I don't have any doors, I'm here for the education so that for the people that I do work with, I can make sure that they're doing it right.
Nice. Do we miss anybody? Anybody sneak in? Allison? She didn't sneak in, but she's still here.
She's distracted working.
She's distracted
She's Allison.
working.
She's interested.
Nice. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Brian Williams. I'm a long-term buy and hold investor here in northern Colorado. I have properties in Fort Collins, Loveland, Evans, Greeley, Windsor, Longmont, something like that, from single-family homes up to small apartment buildings. So I'm going to start with standing over here because I still can't see because of the glare. This is just from MrLandlord.com, which if you guys haven't ever been there, go check it out. It's actually the site that I run credit checks for tenants through, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. But they just had a top 10 list. It's just kind of a good opener to kind of get us in the mood for property management, right? This number 1 is just so important, and we talked about it, which would have been 3 weeks ago in tenant screening. Once you buy, the most important thing you can do is doing tenant screening really well. And the analogy to this is if you're like, oh, and you like the sob stories and you want to give people a chance, instead of thinking about it as a rental property, think about how much does my rental property cost? Excellent. I'm going to put that much cash in a suitcase and I'm going to set it right in front of me. And then I'm going to be like listening to the sob story and I'm going to be like, do I want to give them this suitcase? Are they going to bring it back in a year? And if the answer is no, great. Have a nice day, right? That should take care of your sob stories. This is a huge investment. You want to protect it. Right? Just giving people a chance, probably not the best way to run your business. If you're running a hobby, it's up to you. But we're here to run strong businesses that make profit. James?
I'd just say be intentional with your charity and run your business like a business, and then give the money you want to give away to people that could really use it very intentionally and deliberately.
Yes.
And don't let them force you to be charitable to them.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Make your properties mechanically sound, right, before you rent them. So every time I buy a new property, I have an inspection done, and Most landlords won't do this, but I actually go through the inspection and I hire my handyman or whatever proper work person is, and I have them fix anything that's going to possibly come up as an issue, right? Hey, this outlet has reverse polarity. It's getting fixed, right? Hey, there's a leak in the gutter. It's getting fixed. It doesn't have to be fixed, but if I fix it now, the tenant won't complain, right? The tenant has to complain about all those issues to me to get them fixed. How do they feel about the property? Not very good, right? Oh, I had to call him again about this stupid leak in the back, right? Inspect your units at least, I'm going to add the at least every 6 months. That's not just drive by it. That's go inside, walk the property, and see what it actually looks like. I don't know why. James, you can't take pictures of the slides.
Sorry.
Yeah. You made this rule.
I know.
Yeah. So you get what you allow, right? This is the sob story, kind of the emotion side. What we taught in tenant screening is be objective, right? It's not a subjective thing. But you get what you allow. If you say, oh, you paid your rent 10 days late, it's okay, and I don't charge you the fees, guess what? Next month they're paying 12 days late, and they're going to expect the same thing. So don't let yourself be taken advantage of, right? Give to the charity as James says that you want. Document everything. What does that mean? What are some things you guys are going to document? Late payments. Condition of the property. Complaints what? Damages, right? Literally everything. You're going to document everything because if anything ever happens and you get taken to court, you want to easily be able to just pull this stuff out and go, here you go, judge. This is the entire record of the transaction. This one's also super important, right? You'll talk to a lot of people in real estate. Don't take, whether it's landlording advice, we could cover this up, right? In just general, don't take advice from people who aren't doing exactly what you want to do and who aren't already happy and wealthy doing it, right? If they're not this, they might not be doing it very well, right? You can go talk to a landlord who's, yeah, I let my tenants pay late rent. And I have a personal friend who very loose on his rules, has quite a few rentals, and that's just how he runs it. It's not his main business. He has a job as well, but I'm like, man, if you would just tighten that up, raise your rents a little bit, you would be much happier. So be careful who you're listening to. Know the tenant and landlord laws for your state. This one just kind of goes without saying. As we talked about in tenant screening, there are ways now that you can actually unintentionally discriminate. It used to be, hey, do you have a felony? Yes, I do. Okay, you won't pass my application process. As it turns out, as many of you know, there are many more African Americans and Hispanics in prison who have felonies due to whatever you want to call it, but it comes back to our judicial system. And so if you actually discriminate based on just the fact that you have a felony, you are unintentionally discriminating against African Americans and Hispanic people. So try and figure that one out and then call your attorney, because I don't have the right answer. Plan ahead. Cover your what ifs before they happen. Right? What if my furnace breaks? What if the tenant doesn't fulfill his lease? Think through those scenarios and plan ahead. You'll be much better prepared and you won't have to be in such a reactionary state. Keep some reserves on hand. James and I think taught like one of those segments of arguably the best class of the year. One of them was on how much reserve should you have? If you have one property, how much should you have?
6 months.
$1 million, 6 months mortgage. See, it's a wide array, right? And then if you have 100 properties, how much do you need? $1 million and 6 months of rent, right? It's very difficult, but you need reserves. Totally different class. And most of you are here, obviously, so you kind of joined your local landlord association, which we're very glad to have you guys, especially those of you who are new tonight, so welcome. So this is kind of where we're at, since these classes are kind of a sequence. There's the tenant screening classes and a couple that come after this that kind of go in order. Basically, you bought a property or you had one that's going to turn over. You've already advertised. We've taken calls. We've talked about how to do the showings. You've screened your applicants on a first-come, first-served basis. Why do we do that? So we're not discriminating. All the property managers that are taking like 10 applications and somehow picking the best one, how do you think they're picking the best one without screening them? Yeah, that's a hard question, isn't it? Is it, oh, hey, this person's a family? there's 2 people and that's it, and they're going to move into a 3-bedroom versus this other application with 3 kids? I don't know. Is it, hey, this person makes $100,000 a year and this person makes $40,000 a year, but they both qualify income-wise? Somehow, someone is picking one of those. They're not just like reaching into a hat and pulling one out and being like, oh yeah, let's start with this one. So screen them on. Whoever gets your application fully completed, right? Incomplete applications don't count. Screen them first. And as I've said, and as James will echo, and I can't say it enough times, this is the most important thing you can do to protect your investment, is screen your tenants really well, right? So if you didn't listen to the podcast on tenant screening, it's up there. Go listen to it. And thank you. And we gave documents out that's basically a start to having your tenant screening criteria written down, right? It's like a 6-page document that I wrote that's basically my experience and what I've done over and over and over and over as I screen tenants and updated. You should take that to your attorney and make sure that you're not discriminating, state laws are different, and all of that. But it's a great place to start. If you don't have anything written down and you're just, yeah, they got this much money, I'm okay, I'm going to put them in the property, that's scary. What's that? James.
Yeah, they are available online.
Yes, they are available online. James, where are they?
So they're actually on the learntobерich.com website under downloads. It's a left-hand link for doing that. But then if you want to let them know where the podcast is, that'd be great so that people can go listen to it.
Why don't you just tell them?
It's podcast.ncraig.com, and that'll go straight to iTunes, and you can go listen to, it's like 120 episodes now, all different classes.
Yeah. Yep. So basically all the classes since we started teaching here in this room, almost all of them are up there, I think. All the ones that we recorded. Yeah. Yep. Podcast.ncraig.com. So ncraig is just this group, N-C-R-E-I-G, but podcast.ncraig.com. So you processed, you approved an applicant, you collected your reservation deposit within 24 hours because that's what our application, which is also on that site. So our application criteria, the application is up there. The application evaluation sheet is up there. There's a whole bunch of stuff up there that's super helpful. You basically had a lease signing. So we teach this in the lease class, so we're not going to teach it tonight. You can tell there's a ton of material here, but you walked through the lease with the applicant. You didn't just say, hey, Ethan, here's your lease sign here, you're good to go, give me your first month's rent. You actually sat down and had a 20 to 30 or longer minute meeting with your tenant and set the expectations up front. This is what Section 1 means, this is what Section 2 means. And I tell my tenants, hey, so rent is due on the 1st by 5 p.m. If I don't have it, right, I'm going to text you or email you and say, hey, where's rent? And on the 3rd day, you're going to have a notice on your door. When you get that notice, right, you still have a chance to pay rent. But if you don't, the eviction process is going to start and you're going to be evicted, right? There's no joking around here. You take good care of the house, you pay your rent on time, we will get along famously, right? Call me if there's something wrong, I'll make sure it gets fixed. But if you don't, this is what's going to happen, right? Tell them then, right? That way they understand it.
Yeah, my clients actually get a additional presentation, which is not on the podcast, which is a almost 2-hour class of me walking through the lease as if I was explaining it to a tenant, so you can hear and practice that too.
That one may actually be on the podcast for me teaching it too. I swear we both thought that differently.
I don't think we did.
Yeah.
I could be wrong now.
Yep. So you had a lease signing and you made the property rent ready. And so here we are, right? The tenant cycle. What are you going to do before move-in? So you've got the property in rent ready condition, right? Record yourself a video of the property before the tenant moves in. Why do we want to do this? Documentation for evidence. Right? You want to know, hey, this is the condition of my property so that you can look back, because if you have more than one property or this tenant's there for 3 years and you're like, I don't really remember, like you can't remember, was this, door, did it have a hole in the back of it? You don't know. So record all of that. Take pictures of every room and area of the house. And thank goodness for digital cameras, because I would run out of film if we were still using film. Literally, I will walk around and picture. Like I have a picture of everything, right? Floors, walls, doorways, inside stuff, outside, everything. Take those pictures, right? Take pictures if you don't already have them of your appliances, right? Take a picture of the model and the serial number, right? twofold. One, you'll know if something goes wrong, you can call in. The other one is, hey, if a part breaks for that, those little door shelves, they're notoriously expensive. They're ridiculous, right? They break all the time. You have to replace them. So you can do it without having to be, hey, what's the model and serial number? Just order the part. Comes, go replace it for your tenant. Take pictures of toilets, showers, sinks, underneath the sinks in the cabinets, right? How are you going to know if there's a water leak, right? Obviously, if there's a big water stain, that's fine. But if you've got the pictures, it's much easier. If you don't have a picture prior to move-in, right, it's much, much harder to defend this in court. The judge is going to be like, what did it look like before move-in? You're going to be like, I didn't take pictures. You're going to be like, great, then I can't prove there was any damage, so case dismissed. So, tenant's already been approved. Yeah, Ethan.
Just real quick, instead of pictures. Oh, wait, question.
Oh, yeah.
You guys, I know it's annoying to do the mic, but when people listen after the fact, it's much better.
Just instead of pictures, you don't just do a move-in checklist. It's pretty detailed with the tenant signing off. That's what we do. So we don't have all the picture storage space. I mean, that would be ideal, but it's pretty detailed. So we just have the tenant sign off, and then there's not really any dispute after the fact.
Yeah, the problem is without a picture, there can be dispute, right? Like, how clean was it, right? Hey, they come back and they say, well, the screens on the windows, they weren't clean, and that's part of your move-out criteria. And they're like, well, I cleaned them to the standard they were. You've got no proof. You don't have a before and after photo. Make it really easy on yourself if you ever have to go to court. I do have a move-in checklist, but this is for my protection. The move-in checklist is so the tenant can communicate to me effectively on move-in and say, these are the things I think are wrong with the property, and then you can decide whether or not to fix them. Yeah, I would always take pictures. So before that tenant's going to move in, right, they've paid their reservation deposit. They haven't paid their first month's rent because that's technically not due until they get keys. So what are we going to do? We're going to start communicating with them. Hey, it's a week before your move-in date. Just want to let you know it's coming up, right? This is what you're going to have to pay to get your keys. And how do we take payment? Cashier's check, right? Do we take cash? No, we do not take cash. We take cashier's checks. We do not take cash, ever.
What about personal check?
So if they want to give you a personal check far enough in advance that you know it has passed your bank and it won't bounce, I am technically okay with that. I have had people basically say, hey, I want to give you my first month's rent now, and it's a month in advance. I'm happy to do that. If it's a week, it's too close. Some banks, it will take a week for them to notify you, and then you won't know.
Just FYI, it is actually illegal to refuse cash. It's legal tender, so you have to take it if it's offered. That is federal law.
I don't think that's true, actually.
Yeah, I don't think that's true either.
No. I mean, if I show up to a title company with cash to buy a house, they would turn me away.
Yep.
I don't think it's true.
Yeah. You can't take $100,000 in to buy a $100,000 house at a title company. You can't do it. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that's true because there's a safety issue involved, right? If I meet you somewhere and you give me $2,000 in cash and you told your friend, right, and he comes and mugs me, that's a safety issue for me.
Yeah, I probably would also be willing to take, even if it was illegal per se, I'd be willing to go and risk that to stand in front of a judge and explain why I'm not accepting cash.
Yeah. Yep. So, if you want to accept cash, that's up to you, unless it's a federal law that we're all violating unknowingly, and we'll go find that out. But I'm pretty sure that's not the case because I don't even think property management companies will take cash. So there's no way they're violating federal law, all of them. Yeah. So remind them, hey, it's going to be a full month of rent, even if you're moving in on the 15th, right? All of your leases, in my opinion, should have payment due on the first of the month. That way it's consistent across all your properties, right? Why are we taking a full month of rent if they move on the 15th?
Extra money.
Extra money. No, so this is really important, and a lot of property managers don't do this, right? Hey, you're moving in on the 20th, you pay from 20th to the 31st, and then on the 1st, you pay a full month of rent, right? This is crazy to me. This basically says that if you rent the property on the 31st, you pay 1 day of rent to get keys. No, you pay a full month of rent because I want to make sure that you are at least good for a full month, right? I've vetted you, I've done everything I can to make sure that you're going to be a great tenant, but you need to come up with a full month of rent. What are we going to do? We're going to prorate that second month, right? So If you're moving in on the 16th of the month and rent's $1,500, right? Hey, guess what? You paid $1,500 for a deposit. It would be normally $750 to get keys, but no, we're going to collect the full $1,500, and then on the next first of the month, we're only going to collect $750. No tenant should have a problem with this.
And if they do, that's probably a screening flag, a red flag when you're screening them. They don't have enough to do that.
Yeah. Right? And if it's, hey, I'm scraping it together, I can only give you $750, we don't do payment plans, especially not for the damage deposit. If they don't have the full amount now, they're not going to have it when they owe rent later either. Right? That's a big sign. Somebody had a question back here, Mike.
Oh, wait, where is it? Oh.
Shauna. You should just stay over there.
I was there, and then I went
just
to the other
stay
side.
over there.
Sorry, just on the accepting cash, just from federalreserve.gov, it says private businesses, a person or an organization must accept currency or coin as payment for goods or services, but private businesses are free to develop their own policies on whether to accept cash unless there is a state law which says otherwise.
Private business.
I'm willing to challenge that. If somebody really wants to make a stink, I'll go stand in front of a judge and explain why.
Yeah.
That's my personal policy.
Yep. So we talked about why it needs to be a cashier's check. The next thing you need to do is basically ahead of time, right? Because if you give this to them on the day they move in, it's not going to get done in time. Send them a list. Know what the utilities are for your property. Send them a list. Here are the utilities you need to call. Service must be in your name as of the first day of your lease. Call them. Do it now. It will take a few days in most cases for the utilities to switch it over, right? Depending on when they can do the meter reads in some cases. So make sure they have this done. Remind them how they're going to gain access to the property on move-in day. So I don't know about you, but the last time I moved, I wanted to be in really early on my day that I started moving because it's going to be a long, painful, sweaty day, right? Do you want to get like a phone call at 5 in the morning? Hey, how do I get into the property? Or do you want to meet someone at the property at 5 a.m.? I do not. I still want to be asleep, knowing they're happily moving in. So how do we give them access? A lockbox. So how do they get the code?
Pay the rent.
Pay the rent. Very good. Right? So like I said, most tenants want to get in early, right? I would put a lockbox on the door and I would text them the code the night before, right? But they have to have already paid their first month's rent, right? They can't just be like, well, I didn't pay. If they're paying first month's rent on the day they're moving in, I'm meeting them somewhere to get that check and hand them a key. And it's not happening at 5 in the morning, right? And most tenants are like, that's fine. We will, give you the cashier's check a couple days in advance. And then I'm like, great, I'll text you the code. If the lease gets signed a super long time in advance, I would highly suggest you touch base regularly with the potential tenant or the tenant that's coming every month at least, just to say, hey, just to let you know, it's 3 months out. Here's what you're still going to need to do. Short email just to connect so that they're not like, man, that guy, he took my reservation deposit. I don't know where he went, right? Because people forget. Move-in day. Give tenant access to the property. So either you're meeting them like we said and giving them the keys, or you texted the lockbox code to them. For me, I put one key in the lockbox, and I put the rest of the keys in the house in a drawer, right? So that, hey, there's one key there. Don't forget to tell the tenant this, right? Because they're like, I only got one key. I'm like, well, there's 2 garage door openers, 2 garage keys, and 3 other house keys in the drawer, right? And in case I don't mention it somewhere else, you should have already changed the locks, right? Old tenant moves out, immediately you change the locks. New tenant gets new keys with new locks. Never have it be the same locks. There is way too much risk there. Yes?
The other thing we do is I make sure they give me a copy of their renter's insurance.
Yep.
Before they move in.
So if you require that they have renter's insurance, which is in my lease, you can have them send you a copy or have your insurance agent send you a copy. The one thing that's hard with renter's insurance is they can give you that copy and they can cancel it tomorrow, right? And so we try to require them to have it, but it becomes a huge hassle across time in some cases to try and keep up with that. So I don't know if when you extend, if you say, hey, I need your renewed renter's insurance again, because if you do, that's great. At least you've got 1-year data points, right?
I have it that they have to list us as additionally
Yep.
insured. So I get copies in the mail of their policy.
Yep, and that's what mine says too. Additional insured, and list my company's name as
As their
liability,
interest
and
may-
tells them exactly what their liability insurance needs to be. Yep, those are all fantastic things to do. So, question here too. She's done. So like I said, I texted about 10 p.m. the night before, and I confirmed they received the text. So they don't call me at 5 a.m. because guess who's not answering their phone? Me, because my phone is not in my bedroom. So that avoids really unhappy tenants, right? If they can't get in the house and they're in their U-Haul truck and they've pulled up, they're pissed, right? Guess who they're pissed at? You. Guess what? It's day one of at least probably a year lease. Not a good start. Don't do that. Check in later that day. What are we trying to do here? We're building rapport again with our tenants. Hey, how's your move-in going? Is everything going okay? Is the house in the condition that you expected, right? You've still got your move-in report. You're going to fill that out, but build that rapport, right? And tell them, hey, you've got 7 days. Look around the house. Let me know what's going on and fill this thing out and make sure you get it back. Because if they don't get it back, it basically is them saying everything is perfect, right? Which we all know everything is not perfect even in a brand new house, especially not in a brand new house. So,
Brian, you say to check in with a text or an email. Have you ever arrived on site to make sure that the people that arranged for the lease or on the lease are actually the ones moving in, or again, are they moving in the fraternity house?
Yeah, so I don't show up when they're moving in. You'll see that I do walkthroughs later to verify that the people that are on the lease are the people that are moving in. But I have screened them well enough, hopefully, that indeed they are the people moving in. I've never had that actual problem. I do know other people that have had that problem, but it's been because they just handed somebody a key without really doing screening. And so you can definitely do that. And if you prefer, right, if that's a concern, I would suggest, hey, you just meet them there and, hey, I would like your cashier's check. Here's the keys, right? The problem with that is as soon as you drive off, the fraternity can show up, right? So the only real way to consistently prevent that is to do walkthroughs and note, hey, I rented to 2 people, yet there's 7 beds in the house. What's going on, right? And that happens. So should you do a walkthrough with the tenant to help them fill out their move-in form? No. Why should you or shouldn't you? For the people that said no, why not?
Because something that's an issue for you might not be an issue for them.
Okay, so we're just looking at them saying, basically walking through and them saying, that's got a scratch, that's broken. Like, would you want to do that with your tenant? You're saying yes. Why do you do it?
Wait a second, Mike.
I told you to stay over there.
Because the idea of a scratch or a stain can be different. They could claim it was a huge stain or a huge scratch, and I come in there, it's like, that is barely noticeable. So I always put like a little asterisk on there, put small scratch, right-hand corner or whatever.
Yeah, if you're going to do that, I would just take a picture, right?
No, well, I do the move-in checklist and I take pictures.
Yep.
But I do that with the tenant when they move in.
So I don't do that, and the reason I don't do that is it's a lot of time, right? If you have 20 properties and 6 of them are turning over every year, this is like for some tenants, as I'm going to show you, this is a long walkthrough, right? For some people, they're just like, yeah, looks great, sign, right? But for some people, it's like, there's a scuff here, and there's a dot here, and you're like, oh my gosh, 72 pages later of move-in inspection report, right? It's going to be painful. So same for move out. Like, I can go look. I've already taken pictures. If they send me something I don't have on record, I can simply say, great, please send me a picture of the thing that you're talking about, because I don't have any record of, a large gouge in the hardwood floors, right? Here's the picture I have, and they send the same picture back. I'm like, great, that picture is 1/2 centimeter, right? I'm going to call that a scratch in the hardwood floors, and that's okay. You won't be charged for that on move out, right? Because that's what tenants are afraid of. They're afraid of being screwed by their landlord on move out.
That's what they're afraid of?
Many other things too.
I would just say our argument for doing it is the same argument that we have for going through the lease, just so that everyone's on the same page and you've kind of reviewed it with them, even if it's not necessarily a question of taking the picture or not, but it is that, like, hey, remember we discussed this a year ago, like I remember looking at this with you and we kind of went through it, as opposed to like, oh, I thought you knew about this, and it's kind of reflected, it's kind of not, so just to get everyone on the same page.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong answer. I'm just simply telling you, For me, going through the lease is an expectation setting thing that I have to do because I want the tenants to understand this is no joke, right? If they're like, and some people will fill this form out and it's like everything works and, you know, hey, there's a scratch here and this doorknob doesn't work, and that's normal, right? That's like a normal typical tenant. It's the tenants, and I'll show you one where it's the long list, and then I just go back and I say, then I might choose to walk through the house with them and say, show me everything and we're going to cross them off the list so that you won't be charged, right? Because that's not the goal, right? It's not my goal to try and charge people for stuff that's normal wear and tear, or obviously that was already there.
If you're going to do walkthrough or lease, do lease. I think
Yes.
is the best way to say it. But if you're willing to do both, I think that's actually.
Yeah, if you're willing to do it and you've got the time, it's great. If you're trying to manage, 25 units and, 15 of them are turning over in the same weekend, good luck. Question in the back.
I've found that what I say is at move in, I'll come back in a week and we'll go through that checklist. And I like doing that. It builds rapport. It allows me to go through and see what they really did find as damage.
Yep.
And then I can see kind of how they moved in and set up the place. And sometimes I'm like, I had a tenant for one, have a whole bunch of screen printing equipment set up in one of the rooms and drawing a lot of electricity. And wow, hold on a minute here, we can't do this. So I can kind of see a little bit how they moved into the property as well.
Gotcha.
Or the weed growing room in the basement.
Yeah. Yep. So here's the move-in inspection report. I don't know if James has this up on the website, but he's welcome to steal it from me and post it up there so that you guys can have it. This is the one that I use, that I created. It's basically got all sorts of stuff, right? Does all this stuff work? Yes, no. Does the stuff in the kitchen work? Living room, dining room, family room, 5 bedrooms. If you've got more than that, you'll need to alter the form. If there's only 3 bedrooms, I typically just cross out 2 of them, or the tenant does. But we're looking, hey, does the ceiling fan, do the doors and windows work? Do the light fixtures work? Do the outlets, thermostat, right? Carbon monoxide detectors, like I want to make them check that off. Did they go and actually check the carbon monoxide detector? Let's get them in that habit of checking that, right? Do all your appliances in your kitchen work? Bottom part of that, right? Here's the bathrooms. 5 bathrooms, you got a lot of bathrooms, I guess, but maybe there's 1 per bedroom. I don't know. But you've got all the bathrooms as well. So does all the stuff and all the equipment there work? Do you have a pool? Hopefully not. Pool equipment, a spa. But hey, if you're renting a washer or dryer to them, sprinklers, are they working, right? This gives them the opportunity to say, hey, and you will find that in some sprinkler installations, one that I particularly had, the sprinkler heads sit too high above the ground and the tenants constantly mow them right off, right? This is not fun. So when they're like, yes, 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 you're like, well, 6 of the heads are gone. I see you mowed the yard once this year, so you must have hit all 6 on that mowing. And then this is the bottom of that, or this is, I guess, page 2 of that form, right? How many keys did you get and where did they get it to, right? Especially garage door openers, right? And then other notes on property condition, right? So this is all the other things that are wrong with the property, right? So I found a scratch, this door doesn't lock, the window doesn't open, anything they want. And if they have more than fits in this space, notice I didn't give them 3 pages to fill out. I'm trying for them to like, hey, if there's serious stuff wrong, write it down. If not, don't write it down. The bottom of that page says, resident accepts the responsibility to complete this form within 7 days of taking possession and to return a completed signed copy to management. Failure to do so shall be resident's acknowledgement that property is in perfect condition in every particular. So I tell the tenant, well, pretty much everything that's wrong with the property is now going to be your fault. You need to turn this form in, right? Because that's what that sentence means. And then this represents an accurate description as such and such date, sign and date, and then I date when I receive it. Any questions on the form? Lashana.
Do you ask them to provide pictures, and if so, how? Do they turn it in with that document, or?
So if they want to send me pictures, some tenants will voluntarily send you more pictures than you ever want of stuff you just are like, I don't need a picture of that. I have a picture of that. I have a video of that too. But if they send pictures, great. Let me go through this next part, and I think you'll see what happens. So the first week, right, if the move-in form doesn't get returned in 5 days, they've got 2 days left. I'm pinging them, and I'm saying, hey, it's really important that you turn this in. It's for your protection, right? Walk through the house, write stuff down, verify that it's going well. You've got 2 days left. When they turn that form in, I'm going to tell them, hey, thank you for sending this in, and I'm going to look through this and see, are there important issues on this form? Like if I was a tenant living there, what would be important that I would immediately want somebody to fix, right? This is going to open your communication channel too, because you're going to go back and say, hey, I saw you wrote this down. You know, I don't really understand it. Can you tell me more about what's going on? Some people are going to care about things you absolutely don't. That doesn't mean they're not important to them, right? That doesn't also mean that you have to fix them, but you should have a conversation about them. If they write 10 things down and you fix 3 of them and don't talk to them about the other 7, they're going to feel like you only did 30% of the job. So have a conversation. Explain to them, you know, the ding in the washer isn't really something we're going to replace the washer for, right? If the washer was non-functional, we'd replace it, but the ding is just cosmetic, so we're not going to fix that at this time, right? So do they understand you saw their concerns? The problem with this is they're going to be quietly unhappy, which you don't want your tenants to be. You want them to be loudly happy all the time. So handle any of those move-in form issues and communicate, because some of those issues might take you a month or 2 to fix, depending on what they are. Hey, there's a leak in the gutter. It's the middle of winter. You know, the ice is dammed up over the gutter. You got to wait for that stuff to melt and then have somebody go out and quote it 2 or 3 times and then actually perform the work. Build trust. Show you're responding to their concerns. Like I said, this doesn't mean fix everything. It does mean communicate with your tenants, right? That's the most important thing here. So here's an example of a report that I got back. Legit report. So air conditioning works, yes, no. Yes, no. I don't know what that means, right? Like, no, it doesn't work because it's circled extra, right? So, you know, faucets look to have been installed incorrectly. I didn't know you were a plumber, right? What does that mean? I need to go find out as a landlord. A faucet's installed incorrectly? Is it leaking? Right? Like, I would like to know immediately, right? The outlets in the living room are loose. Hey, the outlets in the dining room, they're also loose. This is a common complaint that most landlords will just brush away. Let me tell you, if you've ever lived in a place where you take your vacuum and you plug it into the wall and you're vacuuming and the plug just falls out, it pisses you off, right? It's like, stupid plug. And that's what happens as plugs get older. Stuff just falls out and it won't stay in. The other famous one is, you know, you're drying your hair in the bathroom with the hairdryer in the morning, the plug just constantly falls out. Those are the 2 things that I've heard more complaints about outlets, and it makes people really angry, right? Because they're just trying to shove that thing back in the plug, and they're unhappy. It's not that much to have that outlet pulled out, replaced, right? But it makes that tenant much, much happier. So these are the things you don't want that tenant to be seething under their skin and wanting to do.
Wait, questions, questions.
The question was, how often do I have the plug fall out when I'm drying my hair? For those of you that are listening to the podcast, I have maybe a millimeter of hair on my head. So not very often, because it air dries in 10 seconds. So this doesn't look too bad, right? You're like, okay, I need to follow up on this, definitely this, and my loose outlets at some point. Next page, hey, that looks good. Wait. Washer, cover must be slammed to work. That's not cosmetic. That's them. And now I'm like, well, how did you find that out? Right? Hey, this stupid wash. I'm like, okay, well, that's awesome. So there's definitely some issues I need to take care of, right? Okay, perfect. This was the next page. Hey, we only got 2 keys, and 1 and 1, and this was on purpose. And then this is always a fun sign. Oh, no. See attached sheet. Couldn't fit it on this one. So this is the attached sheet, right? And this is sometimes what you'll get. And this is most likely a tenant that has been totally hosed by a previous landlord who nickel and dimed them for normal wear and tear. Please don't do this to your tenants. It gives landlords a really bad name. So you can see, master bedroom, squares of unpainted sections near top corners of the windows. I can tell you, these are not even visible. I'm not sure how they saw them. Chip-in baseboard. There's more than one, ladies and gentlemen, right? Nail holes, some dents and scratches along walls. Cable cover cracked and broken. Several scuffs. Screws stuck in the wall. Okay. Paint chips on wall around light switch. Scratches. Marks on doors and doorway. Chip in a toilet seat. Ripped, torn shelf lining. They are thorough. right? Good for them. They were actually some of the best tenants I've ever had. So perfect, right? Scratches, unpainted sections, paint on window frame, burnt appearance inside microwave. This one kind of gets my attention. Maybe I didn't notice this on walkthrough. What's going on with the microwave? Does it need to be replaced? Is it in danger? How many of you have ever stuck a paper towel in a microwave and had it light on fire? Scary. Let me just say,
you're the only one that did that, actually.
the paper towels that have the printing on them, some of those light on fire. For real. And when I called the hotline, there was literally, they had changed their answering voice message to be like, and it was like some major brand, right? The message was, if you put a paper towel in the microwave and it started on fire, press 1. And I was like, okay. So it was apparently a pretty big problem. So this is the second sheet, right? And it just continues, right? You can see, you know, the shed outside is very dirty. Well, of course it is. It's a shed. Like, it's been swept out, but it's still dirty. So a lot of this stuff, right? And they're concerned, right? And so I gave them a call and I said, look, all the stuff that you're listing on here, all the dents and the dings and the scuffs, like, you're not going to get charged for that, right? And they were like, well, we did last time and we don't want it to happen again. And I'm like, fine, fair enough. And so I'm like, you've documented it. You won't be charged for that stuff. And we moved on. They left the house nicer than it was when they got there. So do that. Tenant cycle. So first month, right? They've already paid you for a full month of rent. I like to send courtesy rent reminders. I know a lot of people don't do this. I don't know if all property managers do this, but I send an email on the 20th of every month, because rent's always due on the 1st, that basically says, hi, it's a courtesy rent reminder that your rent of $1,500 is due by the 1st of the month. Please make your payment to ABC Holdings LLC. You can either deposit directly into the following account at any First Bank or whatever location, right? Here's the bank account name and the last 4 digits of the bank account. You can literally walk to any First Bank and deposit rent. Or mail the check to the following address. Feel free to mail the check as early as you want. It will not be cashed until the 1st of the month, right? This eliminates the excuse of, well, I tried to time the mail system, which is not reliable, right? It is 2 days sometimes from Greeley to Fort Collins, and other times it's 7 days. Not sure why. Sometimes it's because the tenant didn't mail it. I do know this, right? And so it's up to you. Or you can do the online, just have it auto withdrawn from their account, right? Which I don't cover here. And if you're doing that, you probably don't need this reminder. But for me, it's a courtesy. It's a once a month. They get an email from me. And so if they're having a problem with something, it's like, oh, I should reply and say, hey, my faucet's leaking. Good. Great to know. I want to know that, right? Inspections. Perform a drive-by, I would say, at least once a month. It's a long drive for Ethan. He's got to, but once you're there, it's probably short to see them all, right? Yeah, and what are you looking for when you drive by a property? Cars parked in the yard. Who said in the yard? Yes, the Hawkeye. That's where he parks. I'm just kidding. Cyclones and Hawkeyes can get along as long as we're not playing each other.
Security cameras?
Security cameras. How many of you have ever seen a security camera on like a single family home or a duplex or a triplex? And how many times did you see people coming and going from the property to buy drugs? Because that's typically why they're there, in most cases, especially on multifamily. Yes. And so single family home, I think it's a little different. But we've seen like high-end security cameras strapped to a tree on properties we were looking at purchasing. It's a good sign something was going on. And then you start talking to the neighbors and you find out that maybe it was a meth house and all sorts of stuff. But what else are we looking for besides cars parked in the yard? Yard maintenance, right, perfect. So that includes mowing, weeding, right, like making it generally look the same as when they moved in.
Number of cars?
The number of cars, right? So the cars parked is really a good one because you want to know, hey, how many cars are parked here? Are any of these not matching the license plates that are on the application, right? Because if you only have 2 people living in the house and you drive by and there's 2 cars in the garage and 3 on the street, you're like, well, the 2 in the garage, you know, maybe they're just having some friends over. Next time you drive by, hey, the same 3 cars are parked here still. Probably doing a walkthrough of the house immediately, right? To find out what's really going on. What else are we looking for? What is your HOA not like? It's a good hint. Huh? Trash. Rubbish, right? Are they putting their trash cans away? If your tenant lives in an HOA neighborhood, you'll get this violation like once a week because they'll leave their trash cans out for 25 hours after the trash has been picked up, and the HOA is just like, yep, 25 hours right in the ticket. So looking for trash.
Evidence of smoking.
Evidence of smoking. If you've ever done a house check when you're screening a tenant and it says, at the bottom of my application it says, does anyone smoke? No. And you go to meet them at the house and you walk up and the yard is littered with cigarette butts, it's a problem. So looking for that. Is the yard maintained? Trash put away? Is the snow shoveled? I'd highly recommend, if it snows, drive by within 24 hours after it snows. Did they shovel? Did they not? The city actually cares if it's over 2 inches or something. The city can come and give you a ticket for not shoveling in Fort Collins. Are there cars or people not on the application that shouldn't be there? Are there a bunch of people standing outside looking around like, why are you watching us? If the issue is a first-time issue, just, hey, tenant, you need to mow your yard, right? I need you to have that done by Wednesday at 5 o'clock. I'm going to come back and check. Please make sure you pull the weeds on the side of the house as well, right? No big deal. It's just, hey, let's give them a deadline. Let's make sure they correct it and then double check it. If it's a repeat offense, right, this becomes the place where, do you want to post a notice, right? You can post a notice because they're in violation of their lease, right? You could technically evict them for not mowing their yard, right? It would be difficult, more difficult than not paying rent, but you could do it.
And that's next week's class.
And that is solving tenant challenges, yes. But consider posting a notice, right? Typically, if you're going to post a notice, most property managers charge a fee. I would suggest you charge a fee because it adds a little bit to the, hey, I had to come out here extra. I double checked, right? You're making me check on the property all the time to make sure you're mowing your yard. I'm posting this notice. It's a $50 fee. You need to make sure this is handled immediately, blah, blah, blah. Depending on your lease and depending on the issue, you probably have the right to charge the tenant to have the work done if they don't do it by the deadline. So for yard care, my lease says if you don't do it and you've been notified, I can have it done and you will foot the bill, right? Because I can't just let it grow and grow and grow. And in some cases, in one case, the city actually came and mowed a tenant's yard for them. And then the city will charge you, like they think me having somebody mow the yard is expensive. When the city mows the yard, it's expensive. It's like $90 to tell you we're going to come mow your yard and then $90 to actually mow your yard. So don't let that happen. This is probably yard care, snow removal, trash removal, things of that nature. If the condition's not acceptable, right, you go back and check, notify the tenant, and schedule a full inspection, right? You drive by the house and the yard is just littered with trash. I'm calling the tenant and I'm being like, so we need to do a full inspection and I need to do it as soon as you can, right? And depending on what your lease says, you may or may not have the right to enter their house at any time with or without notice. I would highly recommend you always notify them. Too many people have guns. Anything you want to add? Was there a question? Tammy? You're just taking fun pictures?
Question,
Yeah.
1 second.
You're mic'd up.
If you do have to hire a third party to go mow the yard, will that third party bill the tenant? Or
Not
bill-
likely.
Right. So
Yep.
then.
They're going to bill you.
Yeah,
You're going to pay
and
it. And
you
you're going
bill-
to charge it to
and
the
you
tenant.
bill it back to the tenant.
Yep.
And then what if they don't pay you?
Same thing as if they didn't pay you rent.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and we're going to cover that next week. That's basically what that whole class is about.
Kind of. Yeah. It's how to solve the issues. It's not necessarily all the details. There's a lot of issues with tenants. So tenant cycle, keep going, right? What else are we going to do? We're going to perform a walkthrough every 3 to 6 months. Why are we doing it?
Protect our asset.
Protect our asset, right? We loaned them this $300,000 suitcase of money. We want to make sure all $300,000 is still in the suitcase, right? They're supposed to just put this suitcase in their bedroom and watch it. They're not supposed to touch it or play with it. They're just supposed to take care of it, right? So we want to do this every 3 to 6 months. Some people will suggest every season, right? Spring, summer, fall, winter. Some people say 4 months. Some people do 6 months. Figure out what works for you depending on the stuff that we're going to talk through. This is a more thorough inspection that you're going to do. You want to give your tenant notice. You don't want to be like, hey, guess what? I'm doing an inspection tomorrow at 5. You know, make sure everything's cleaned up. You want them to be able to like do what they need to do. During the inspection, what are we looking at? Number 1 for me, I'm looking for water leaks. Tenants do not always see nor care about water leaks. Water leaks will cost you thousands of dollars with one water leak, right? Sometimes 5 figures. I'm sure it could be more. I have paid over $10K for one water leak. So it's no joke, and it happens like that, right? It's like drywall gets wet, then you got potential for mold. You got to dry the place out. Now you got to repair the drywall. You probably got to repair some flooring. You just build yourself $5,000 or $6,000. So I'm looking for bad grout, caulk that needs to be redone, drips underneath the sink. Every single sink, I will come down, I will open, I will stick my hand under, and I will feel the trap. Is the trap wet? If the trap is wet, you need to investigate.
That sounds really wrong, by the way.
Only to you. You're just thinking bear trap
Maybe
from when
that's
you
what
play
it is.
poker. Ask the tenant, hey, are you having any issues? I'd highly recommend you do this when you talk to tenants when you're looking at buying places too. They'll tell you all sorts of stuff, right? But this is your tenant that you've hopefully built rapport with. Hey, how's everything going? What's not going well? Are you sure there's nothing that, isn't going well? Is anything broken? Any damage that's occurred, right? Look carefully, right? And listen to what they say, because sometimes they'll say something and to them it's little, but to you it's not. Hey, one day I was taking a shower and, the water didn't seem to be full force. Turns out there's a pinch in the line. It's been leaking water behind the shower for a week, right? That's happened. And then it ends up running down the wall, running out the garage ceiling, and dripping on the floor. It's not fun.
So this is an issue that we've been having with the dryers, because I'm one of those people that has a washer and dryer in the units. So you have to pull out the dryer and make sure there's no lint in that tubing, because that is also a fire hazard. And they say, oh yeah, the dryer's fine, and you pull it out and there's all this lint there blocking it up. So you have to check that. You have to do that inspection pretty regularly.
Yeah. So always check behind your dryers. I had to post laminated signs in a property that's a multifamily property that basically says, please clean the dryer filter after each use, right? Because if they don't, it just takes the heating element and it burns it out faster and faster. So, good point. Inspect your carpet, your walls, your appliances. Look for cleanliness. If you see signs of roaches, that's a problem, right? If you see signs of mice, looking for that mice poop underneath your sinks, right? If you see that, don't ignore it. It can become a very big problem very, very quickly, right? They are responsible for keeping the unit clean. And if they create a pest problem by my lease, they are responsible for eradicating it. So that can be super expensive, like really expensive. Check their furnace filter, right? Much like the dryer, right? You need to check the furnace filter, and most tenants won't have changed it since you were there the last time. It's in my lease. It says they're supposed to change it once a month. Some tenants actually do that, but most do not. You may want to take an extra furnace filter with you and change the filter, right? It saves your furnace from dying sooner than it needs to. Huh? Yep. Mark them. Put a date on them. Notify the tenant of anything that's not acceptable. Just have a conversation, right? Hey, the unit isn't as clean as it needs to be, right? The problem we're going to run into is that you're going to have roaches or something else or mice, and once that happens, it's going to cost a lot of money for you to actually get rid of that problem. So I'm going to come back in 3 days, and I need to see the cleanliness be at this level and describe what it needs to be, right? So my application, which you guys can download from online, it has a check mark for, do you have a vacuum, right? So if you don't have a vacuum, you're not cleaning. I should ask them, do you have, Clorox? Do you have rags? Have you ever cleaned a toilet? Something like that. So ask them to correct, and if not corrected, have it corrected for them and bill it to them, right? The cleanliness becomes hard, but if you walk into your place and it's just junk, you may have to have somebody go in there and clean and then bill them for that, but you're going to have to, that's a sign, right? You probably put the wrong tenant in, you're going to have to go back and you're going to have to maintain that cleanliness. So, Lashana.
For the application, if they don't mark that they have a vacuum, can you deny them and put a contingency that you'll approve them if they get a vacuum?
You probably could. Probably require that they have a vacuum. I'm pretty sure vacuums aren't protected class.
Or do you give or do you give one to them to use or anything
I'm not
like
giving
that?
them one because then they're gonna be like, it broke. Now it's my responsibility, right? Yeah. Yeah. If you don't have a vacuum and you don't know how to clean, you're probably not renting my $300,000 box of money. You know. Yeah. Or a lawnmower. The application also says lawnmower. So if they're mowing the yard, they need to have that. So tenant cycle, right? They've been living in the property. We've been doing our inspections. We've got 90 to 120 days left on our lease. What are we going to do? Start talking about renewing, right? First thing we're going to do is go do that property inspection so that we know what the current condition is, right? We're going to inform ourselves, hey, what's the condition? What are we probably going to need to fix? What would turnover potentially look like? And what does renewal look like, right? So handle as many of these items as you can during that inspection prior to the tenant moving out or extending. You may not know yet. Why do we want to do that? Don't do stuff that's easily going to be damaged again, but it's a good faith effort to say, hey, I walked through, this is stuff that really isn't your fault, it's just normal wear and tear. I'm going to take care of it. Is your tenant more likely to renew? Yes. Are they more likely to be willing to pay a little more? Oh, there's 2 bonuses. So we're building trust. We're showing that we follow through. We're showing that we care about our properties. There are tenants that are specifically looking for landlords who do not give a shit about their properties, right? Do not be that person. If they move out, you have less to do during the turnover period, thus keeping our turnover periods down, right? How are we going to squeeze that window? Do the work while they're still paying rent. That's part of how you get it done. Decide if you're willing to offer a lease extension, right? What is this going to be based on? Payment performance, how they took care of the property, right? Probably how they're treating you as a landlord. Some people are very not nice to landlords. So they could have paid their rent on time, but they could have been a huge pain the entire year, right? Did they call you about every little thing that was really their fault? Hey, I broke a window, you need to come fix it. 3 hours later, it's not fixed yet. What are you doing? Right? I mean, tenants are sometimes irrational, like people, because they're people, right? So, question.
If you find during your walkthrough that it's a pit, well, how do you tell them they can't re-sign without them making it more of a pit?
Yeah, so this is always a risk, right? This is why building trust and rapport for the past 8 months at a minimum, right? Because we're 120 days out, is hopefully going to win in your favor, right? Hopefully you've been to the inspections and you said, hey, you know, this isn't meeting the standard of cleanliness. We need you to fix this. Hopefully they fixed it. And so you don't have to say, well, I'm not renewing because it's a pit. You just say, you know, hey, you know, no leasing extension is going to be offered, right? And they're like, you know, why? And they're like, because I am not sure what I'm going to do with the property. Whatever your case is, right? Or, you know, we just haven't kind of gotten off on the right foot. You know, the property hasn't been as clean as I wanted. There's always the risk of a tenant damaging it, right? And so if they damage it, hopefully you've screened them well enough, they're able to pay, and you've collected enough damage deposit to cover some of that, right? And then if you did screen them well enough and they have backup funds, you end up taking them to court to get the rest. And there's just no other way around it.
This is yet another reason why you really need to screen hard the first time and make sure you do it right.
Yeah.
Oh,
So decide if you're willing to offer a lease extension, and if not, tell them, hey, no extension is going to be offered. You're going to need to be out, you know, at the end of the term of our lease, right? You're under no obligation to offer them a renewal. Determine your renewal rent rate and your market rent rate. What's the difference between those two?
$25.
No. Sometimes, but no. Why are they different? Or are they the same? How come? Mike.
Oh, wait.
Stop coming up here. Stay in the back where the questions are.
I was ready for you.
Well, I think it's different because I don't have to get in there and clean it and do all the work.
Right. Yeah, so to me, if someone's living there, right, and we're at, let's say, $1,695, and that's what they moved in, and they've been there for a year, but I look at market rent, and it's now $1,795, Am I going to bump their rent to $17.95 if they stay? Probably not. Am I going to leave it at $16.95?
No.
Why not?
Well, you have to kind of keep up with the market at some point, but if it's an excellent tenant, you wouldn't want to jack, my opinion is you wouldn't want to jack it up.
So,
repeat
You want to be fair.
yeah, so the comment was you want to be fair and maybe you don't jack it up if they're an excellent tenant. They might be an excellent tenant this year, but maybe not next year, right? You just never know. So to me, the renewal rate is a rate that's between where they're at and what the market rent is, right? I don't want to move it so much that they're like, oh my gosh, we're moving, right? That's not my goal, because then I have to do the turnover, right? So is getting an extra $100 a month for a year, even if it's somebody that moves in for 3 years, worth me doing $4,000 worth of turnover work? No, because that's only $3,600 more. So you need to do that math, but it could go up more each year.
I'll add one more thing, and that is, we haven't seen a ton of down markets, but I've seen a few. And during down markets, sometimes rent is actually lower than what you were able to get when you happen to catch a good tail end of a strong rental market. And so sometimes you're keeping rent the same, or sometimes you're even dropping it the tiniest bit to be in line with an existing lower rental market.
Yeah, and so if they decide, hey, I don't want the extension, and they're moving out, you're advertising at market rent, right? You're going to go say, yep, we're advertising for $16.95, now it's $17.95. That's what we're advertising for. If you want to renew, we're going to change it to $17.30, right? That way it's in between. You're still moving the rent up. The tenant gets in the habit of having a rent increase each year, but it's not, hey, I waited 4 years, I was charging you $1,500, now it's $1,700, $200 increase this year, and he goes, you're out of your mind, right? And you will see this.
Until he starts looking for other rentals. He's like,
and they're all
that sounds like a
$18.95.
deal. I'm going to rent that one.
But this happens all the time. Landlords don't raise their rent. And so you'll go and you'll look at a multifamily property with 8 units right now, and they'll show $700 a month when market rent's $1,000. That's $300 times 8 units a month that landlord is missing out on. Yes, will you have more turnover if you raise rents? Probably, right? This is why some people have lived in the same apartment for 20 or 30 years, because the landlord didn't raise their rent. Does that make the landlord as much money? Not in the long run. And this is basically what I said, right? Is it better to raise the rent $25 and not spend $4K on turnover versus raising the rent $100 and having to spend that money every time? If market rents are going up, like James said, increase a little bit. If they're going down, you'll have to take that into account, especially if you don't want to lose the tenant, right? If they look around, they're like, hey, we live somewhere else for $200 cheaper. Guess what? You're probably going to have to come down to close to that anyway, but do you want to do the turnover? Becomes that challenge.
Do you have a built-in increase in your lease?
I do, but I don't use it, is what it comes down to. And so there are properties in the last 2 years that I have actually left the same for the last 2 years because I got such a high market rent when I rented it. And if I raised it, I mean, I'm already above market rent. And so I'm just like, we're not going to do a rent increase. And they're like, yay. And I'm like, yay. And everybody's happy, right? So perfect. Yeah. But there are also properties where, I look at it and, I raised one $25 the first year and then 30 the next year and then 35 the next year. And it was still lagging so much. And the tenant finally decided to move out. But at that point, it was like, hey, it's going up $75, right? And it wasn't the 75 that she moved out for, but you got to raise your rent to some degree. And you can't be scared of, oh, my tenant's going to move out if I raise the rent. And if they really have an issue, hopefully you've built enough rapport with them that you say, hey, I'm raising the rent $75. Will they come back to you and say, I just can't do $75. I could do $50. Now you can at least decide, right? Leave that door open.
And if you're wondering if it makes a difference, come to the class where we talk about $25 more and just how much of an impact that makes.
Yep. So contact them, ask if they're planning to renew, tell them the new rental rate. Let them know they have to decide 60 days prior to their lease expiring. Send a copy of the lease extension once they say, hey, yeah, we probably want to renew. Even if they don't, you might want to send it anyway. Hey, here's your lease extension. Mine is a one-page doc. Hopefully it's on the next slide. Apparently it's not. It's coming. Do we post that with the lease? Is that something your clients have? I think you asked me to send that to you a long time ago, huh?
I don't know if I include that in the package or not, but if
Gotcha.
I have your permission to do so, I will.
Yeah, so it's James's clients have access to our $6,000 lease that we've had reviewed and I've used and we've each written parts of. But the extension is in here, so I suppose if you watch the video and you like to type, you can recreate it yourself as well. So some people can't or won't decide prior to 60 days. This is very common. They're like, I don't know what I'm doing 2 months from now. Of course you don't. So let me help you decide. I'm going to use my best judgment and work with them. There are cases where it's the 3 roommate situation and 2 roommates want to stay and they're trying to find another roommate. And typically a younger age group, 60 days in advance is sometimes just too much. That's just how I've seen it roll out. And so it takes them like a month to like find that roommate, get them to fill out the application and get them to screen it. And so I'm like, great, let's sign a lease with you 2. Let's lock it down. And then you guys are responsible for finding a roommate. If you don't find one, you're still on the hook to rent the place, right? Find a way to make the situation work for you. I just covered that example, right? Sometimes it's, hey, I'm not sure if I'm getting a job transfer. I might be moving out of state. I'm going to know in 2 weeks. Okay, well, I'm going to show the place, and I'm not going to like rent it probably for 2 weeks. But when 2 weeks come, I need an answer, right? I'm not going to give you another 2 weeks and another 2 weeks, because then you're going to put me in a hard situation. If it's a military transfer, please call your attorney, because military transfers with the proper orders can break a lease with no penalty. For encouragement in quotes, right? Let them know, hey, 60 days till the end of your lease, sign is in the front yard. I'm going to start showing your property today. If I find someone that's interested and is willing to pay the rent that I'm asking, I'm going to sign a lease, and that will mean that you will need to move, right? That's a huge motivator. If the tenants decide to stay, get a signed lease extension, update your courtesy rent reminder to email with the new rent, especially if you're having automated emails sent out, and when it begins. So very simple. Any questions on that? Perfect. Here's the extension. There it is. So simple extension. It's literally a 1-page agreement. It echoes the actual lease. The whole top paragraph basically says this agreement's made on this day of the month between the landlord and the tenant, and here's what the address is. And then we basically have a term extension, right? Term of that agreement shall be extended 12 months. Can be whatever you want, right? If you want to do 6 months extensions or 9 months or 12 months or 24, whatever you want. So it extends until May 31st, 2016. It's not a very good extension because that's like 2 years ago. Rent $1,730. So we're going to have our new rent amount in here. This is just something that's in my lease, which is a discount for prompt payment. Basically, the rent in this case says it's $1,730, but in this case it would really be $1,680. That's what I'd advertise it as. That's what I'd tell them it is. This is the $50 late fee, right? I just do it in a positive way in my lease. That is, hey, if you pay on time, you get a $50 discount. If you don't, rent's $50 more. Come to the lease class if you want more depth on that. Use, we're still talking about the same 2 adults and the same 2 children that were on the application or whatever that was, right? Nothing has changed there. Pets, we're still talking about the same pets, which in this case was no approved pets, right? If you're walking through the house and they have 2 cats running around, you need to update this, right? All other provisions basically remain in full force, and in witness of, we agree to this, sign here and date.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
So do you have a strong preference for doing lease extension? Because I probably would have a preference for doing new lease.
Yeah, I knew you would say that. So if you want to write an entire new lease, I mean, that's fine too. This is basically an extension of that lease. And there are many cases where I have an extension and an extension and an extension, and then they move out. And I've never had an issue with it. So it's been reviewed by an attorney. So I'm fairly sure that it is gold.
I don't doubt that. I just...
You like clean contracts.
I do. I would rather rewrite the whole agreement.
Yep. So that is your prerogative. If you want to just take your lease and redraw it up to say, here's the new term and the new dates, that's fantastic too.
Especially if you make any modifications to your lease, like you have something that's tested and needs to be changed, better to do it that way anyway.
Yeah, if you're adding pets, I would probably do a new lease. If a roommate is changing, you're definitely doing a new lease, right? Even if somebody's name changed due to marriage or divorce or something like that, I'd probably do a new lease just to make it 100% clear. If you ever have a change where there was a cosigner, now there's not, or for some reason you were adding a cosigner from a new roommate, I would definitely do a new lease. Anything that's major that changes, I only use this basically if it's, hey, everything's the same except rent went up $50. And then I use this. The tenants basically initial here, they initial here, and they sign here. Done. Yeah.
Oh, wait, question?
Oh. The seal, yeah.
Who's the question?
The seal is just their signature.
Thanks. What's your take on using DocuSign? Actually, I just did one of these today. Tenant said, can we just initial an extension instead of going a whole new contract? I said, yep, I can have it to you in DocuSign in 20 minutes, and we're done.
Yeah, so, I mean, realtors are using DocuSign to sign contracts, right? So from that perspective, it's fine. Title companies are not using DocuSign yet, right? Why? Because they don't believe that it may hold up, right?
They're moving actually toward digital signatures now.
Yeah, and so whether it'll be DocuSign or something else that's stronger, I don't know. But I think it's fine. I mean, that's my opinion, but I would ask your attorney, right? For me personally, I would much rather have them print something out at home, sign it, and scan it and send it back to me. That way it's their signature, especially if I don't know, because I'm sure there are people that get emails from their realtor that go to their email and they sign for both them and their spouse, right? I'm sure that happens all the time. And so how do you prove that in the court, right? One roommate says, yeah, I got all 3 emails. I opened it up. I signed for all 3. And the other 2 were like, I never signed. You don't have that proof and you don't have their actual ink on a page. Lashana. But my property manager uses DocuSign. So.
Yeah, we use a DocuSign and a software, and we only send it to the person who is signing. Because a lot of times they're like, oh, can I get it? And then I'll forward it to them. And we're like, no, we can only send it to that person because it's a legal document, yada, yada. And it has held up in court, I guess, before. We've had to do it before, so.
It should. I mean, it should hold up in court, but you never know. All right, tenant cycle move out. So if the tenants are not renewing their lease, right, start advertising as soon as you know, right? At least 60 days in advance. This is why we put the 60-day thing there. If you start advertising like the day they move out, how much vacancy are you going to have? A lot more than you need to, right? If you start 60 days in advance and you're like, hey, I think the rent is $2,000 a month for this property, and you put it up and you get no phone calls, right? Maybe you need to start using Zillow instead of Craigslist. But once you do that, right, you're still getting no phone calls, probably your rent is too high. So you drop it to $1,950. You get like 2 phone calls that week. Maybe it's still too high. You drop it to $1,900 the next week and you start getting the right amount of phone calls and qualified tenants calling you. You have enough time to not have to panic to try and get a tenant in your property. Because that's the one thing landlords do. They start to panic when they're like, oh, it's going to be vacant on May 1st. I need to get somebody in there. I'll take just whoever is coming. Right?
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Like, please don't do that. So plan for any of the turnover work. Right? If you need carpet, have your carpet estimate done well in advance. Tell them exactly what day you need it done on. Right? Don't wait. Paint the same way. Schedule this stuff literally. Hey, when are you guys going to be out? The 31st? Fantastic. On the 1st, I am going to have these guys in there. Or even on the 31st at noon, because that's when their lease technically expires by my lease. I'm going to have the carpet person in there on the 31st at noon. Or carpet cleaners, or cleaners, whatever it needs to be. I'm trying to cram it into the shortest period of time possible. I'm going to email them the move-out form and the cleaning instructions, which I'll show you in a second. The move-out form basically says, hey, I also need your forwarding mail address, because that's where I'm going to mail your damage deposit return. A lot of people that are going to leave damages probably don't want to give you this address. Got to get that. Remind them you're going to hire carpet cleaners after they move out. I don't let my tenants clean the carpet themselves. They move out, I hire a professional that I know and trust to actually go in and clean the carpets and do them well. And they are charged, absolutely. I don't know who said that. Oh, it sounded like it came from over there. I was like, I don't know who said that. Yeah, so both carpet cleaners and cleaners, if they don't leave the property clean enough, they're being charged for that, right? They are required by the lease, and it says in there, hey, And I tell them, if you don't want to clean, that's fine. Cleaners will come in and take care of it for you. If you're just in interest of moving out and leaving it however you want to leave it, that's fine. We'll come in and clean it. So both of those happen. I would strongly recommend that even if they're like, yeah, I'm going to do everything on your cleaning list, that you hire a cleaner to actually schedule them on the day you need them, at least 2 weeks in advance, so that they have that day and time reserved. If you need to cancel because you go walk through and it's perfectly clean, which hardly ever happens, then you can cancel them.
And you can't touch the mic because you're sick.
I had a lease once that it was in the lease that carpet had to be cleaned and the tenant had to either pay for it to be done or had to provide a receipt to the landlord that it had been done by a professional truck-mounted system.
Yep. So that's another way. Some landlords, they want you to like do it yourself and call them up. For me, I'd rather just take care of it so I know when it's being scheduled. I know that it was done after they've fully moved out. They're not walking all over the carpets after it was done, moving stuff because they didn't get their moving truck on time or whatever the reason. Remind them, hey, you got to be out by noon on the last day because I got people coming at noon. I'm going to have cleaners there at noon. You need to be fully out. I will be there to get the keys. As this move out date approaches, ask them, hey, when do you actually plan to be out? Most people don't plan to be out at noon on the last day. They're like, I'll be out on the 28th. Their lease ends on the 31st. You're like, fantastic. I've got extra days to do work in the property.
Do you
I'm still
prorate
getting
rent
rent
there?
for. No. No prorating of rent. Question in the back.
Which way? Oh, wait. Microphone. Oh, God. Trying to talk without the mic. That's craziness.
Does your lease identify that that their checkout time is noon?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Even in the extension, even in the extension, 12 noon. That's when they must be out. So this is the first part of my move out checklist. I'm not going to really read all this. I suppose if James wanted to post this, he could post this up there as well. But it's like clean and wash inside and outside of cabinets, including kitchen sink and fixtures, removing all dirt and grease, right? That's pretty specific. It's pretty easy to tell if people didn't wipe out cabinets. Usually if they had a cat, there's cat hair in there. Like, it's really gross. Like, no joke. Clean all appliances inside and out, including behind and beside the stove. It will literally take you 3 seconds to pull your stove out and go like this and know if they actually cleaned what they said they cleaned. Because no one cleans the side of their stove, and it's always disgusting. Right? Clean the bathroom fixtures, windows and screens. Basically wash everything. Wipe down your ceiling fans. Don't leave trash behind. Remove all your stuff. Here's more of it. Right? Exterior areas clean. Weeds taken care of. Yard mowed. Leave all kitchen appliances, window treatments, blah, blah, blah. If they install, you've got a sliding glass door and they install a curtain, is it yours or theirs? It's now attached. They should not remove it. It is actually yours per the lease agreement. So it says that before they install it. Return all keys, right? All light fixtures to work, all electric and plumbing, heating and AC is to be working, smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms shall be working. Leave all utilities on and in your name through the last day of the lease. People are like, oh, I'm moving out on the 28th, I shut the utilities off. Nope, your lease says that you are responsible for utilities through the end of your lease term. Remind them of this, especially if it's in the winter. They shut utilities off for 3 days and you don't know and we've got a deep freeze, you got a lot of damage.
Oh, question?
When I set up the utilities on the new house we just got, they offered to do a tenant release back to the landlord as
Yep.
soon as that tenant disconnects.
Yep. And you
so
should,
there is no disconnect.
Yes, you should always set that up. Most utility companies will tell you about it, some won't, but ask, right? Can I have it reverted to the landlord if the tenant shuts it off, right? And sometimes you'll get a random shut off in the middle of the lease term and you'll be like, what's going on, right? And that's a good sign, right? Because at least you got notified.
Just to build on that, I found out I wanted to have that done as well, and they usually will waive that turn-on fee for the landlord. So
Yep.
if you switch it over,
It's like
there's
$8 or
you got another
$20 depending
fee,
on the
right?
utility
But
company.
if it's an automatic thing, they in all cases waive it in town here.
Yep. Because the reason for that is they want to make sure somebody's going to pay it, right? Because you know how many 3 and 4 and 5 day windows of unpaid utilities there are from this happening? Lots, right? Because I had my utilities, I got a warning posted on the door because the tenant moved out, he shut them off early. I didn't know. I went to look at the house. The warning was, please call us or we're going to shut your gas off. So I called him and I was like, so he's supposed to have it till then. I'm taking responsibility for here and here. I'm like, what? Just out of curiosity, what happens to those 4 days in the middle? And they're like, yeah, not a lot. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So yes.
So I know you can do that with City of Fort Collins, but what about Excel? I mean,
Excel does it.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. All of my properties are set up with Excel that it auto reverts to me. Yeah. So they make you fill out a form and fax it in or email it in, but they will do it. And there's like 2 options. I forget what they are, but Excel, if you go on their site and actually go to their forms page under billing, you'll find the form as well. If you want the copy of the bill that's being sent to the tenant, that's different. Then you need the tenant's permission because that information is private to the tenant now. So you can't just call your utility company, even though it's your own house and you're the owner, you can't find out what your average utilities were in most cases anymore, which is kind of a pain because some tenants are like, hey, can you tell me what average utilities are? And I'm like, I wish I could, but I can't because it's private information and it's not I'm not paying the utility bill. Yeah, so you made...
Can you repeat that?
Barbie basically said that they had a gas leak and they wouldn't tell you guys if they replaced the meter or what happened. And that may be because they don't have you on record as the owner, right? In that case, I would assume they would have a conversation with you. But a lot of this stuff is private and they're trying to follow the laws much more strict. So that's rough.
Hey, Brian had mentioned, he asked me if I put this online. I'm not sure if this exact one, but I was reminded that how many people came to the Christmas party last year? And you guys got a copy of this book? So this has all those checklists, and they're all written out. And those that didn't come to the Christmas party and get a copy of the book, they're all on the website. It's under the Ultimate Nomad Checklist on Learn to Be Rich. It includes like what you do the first week and everything else.
So the last part of this form, this is a one-pager again. I'm going to read this because it's important. All of the aforementioned items need to be completed by your move-out date so that you can, in all caps, receive your full security deposit back, right? Any and all repairs, repainting, trash removal, cleaning, and/or any other expenses that are attributed to restoring your home to its condition prior to your tenancy will be deducted from your security deposit. If additional money is needed, management will send resident a bill. Your security deposit will be mailed within 30 days, because that's what the lease says, at the end of your lease or your move-out date, whichever is later, to the address you provide management. Guess what? If you don't give us an address, where are we mailing it? To the place you just moved out of. Hope you forwarded your mail. Right? Because if you didn't, the check's coming back to me. Please remember to deliver your home in the same condition it was prior to your tenancy. This will ensure you receive the most money possible. Tenants want the most money possible back. This is how you can do that, Mr. or Mrs. Tenant. Sign here, date here. Here's my forwarding address. Move out inspection form. I'm not going to cover this because guess what it looks like? The move-in form, yes. It looks like exactly the same, only it says move out at the top and has all of the same stuff on it. So not a lot different there. Yes, sir.
Brian, true story. We moved here 3 years ago and moved into a brand new house, had it built for us. 6 months later, we moved out, and it was as good the day we moved out as it was the day we moved in. Handed it over to a management company in northern Colorado. They rented it out. 1 year later, we went through the inspection after the people had moved out. 56 unfilled nail holes. And the management company's take on it was that that's considered normal wear and tear. You agree or not?
This is a decision and a discussion I have with my property manager. Technically, most nail holes like that from hanging stuff are normal wear and tear. And that's what stinks. In my opinion, if it was me managing the property and it was excessive, I would probably bill them if they choose to fight it, right? Lots of things can happen, right? Because you're not really sure. What would a judge say, right? Is it a 4-bedroom home that's 2 stories and 1,800 square feet? 56 nail holes? Like, I don't know, what is that? Like maybe 8 per room? That doesn't seem that egregious, right? That's like I hung 4 pictures on this wall, 2 on this one, and 1 on this in each room. That doesn't seem that far out of whack, right? Now, if it was a 1-bedroom apartment and they covered their entire wall, right? Maybe that's egregious, but maybe not. I think it depends on what your lease says. In a lot of cases, to me, what also matters, I'm going to use a different example to put it in perspective. The little things underneath your burners, the drip pans, right? Those are also considered normal wear and tear, right? Which to me is garbage, right? They're not normal wear and tear. They're like a piece of metal that you should be able to keep clean, right? Whether you use aluminum foil or cleaner to clean it, you should be able to clean this. So a lot of people are like, hey, we replace those because they're dirty. It'll take us longer as a property management company to clean them than it will to replace them. So I understand the cost savings to me at that point, but I'm like, you should bill that to the tenants. That won't hold up in court, right? And so I think you have a choice, right? Maybe it will hold up in court, right? I mean, it depends on the judge and the day and how good his day is going, right? Whether you get it in the morning or the evening. But if you bill the tenant, hey, it's $15 for the 3 pans I replaced, and they don't argue it, then you got your money, right? Is that the right thing to do? It's a really gray area, right? Nail holes, like you could try and bill them for that too. Is it they left nail holes and then, it damaged the paint and it was a new paint job when they moved in and they were there for a year? I think you have a better case. The paint's 5 years old and there were other holes when they moved in? Probably not, right? I think the other case that I am more particular on is somebody moves in for 6 months and then they want a sublease and I have to do the turnover work in the middle. To me, I expect that first tenant to bring the property back to exactly the same condition it was, and I have that argument a lot with my property manager as well, because I'm like, no, the nail holes, like you're basically giving me an extra turnover. I don't want to pay for an extra turnover. The lease should state you need to bring it back to the same exact condition if you're going to sublease. Otherwise, charge them the lease breakage fee and let's get a new tenant.
In your number 10, you didn't identify the nail hole thing. Is that something, if you were sitting in my shoes and it was under your skin? Hell, I can remember back in college, we'd fill nail holes with toothpaste.
There it is.
In between the last beer party that we had in the place.
Don't do that, by the way.
Yeah. in my number 10 on here.
Yeah, it's about 4 pages back, I think. All
Yeah.
the lines must be.
Yep. I don't know if I have any. Yeah, so it's not in there, right? And part of that is I don't want tenants filling nail holes, because you know how tenants fill nail holes? They get spackle, they take the big knife, and it's one little pinprick, and they go, and they leave the spackle all over, right? And so I'm like, now I've got a bigger mess, and I will actually charge them if they do that, because that is like way worse than having a nail hole, right? I would highly suggest painting your properties lighter colors so that the holes are minimized, and then for the most part, if you have somebody go through and fill them with toothpaste or spackle, right, you won't be able to see them even if the paint's slightly different. So I think it's a hard one. I think it's really a matter of what you explain, what's in your lease, what your attorney says, and if you ever have to go to court, it's going to be what the judge decides, right? So have a good argument for, the paint was brand new, they put 300 nail holes in just the living room. That seems over the top. Tenant cycle, yes. Is this where we're at? Yes. So finding your next tenant. They said they're moving out. You're looking for your next great tenant, which we talked about. So you're going to advertise, do the showings, screen the tenants, same stuff that you were doing before, sign the lease, and communicate, right? Now you've got a tenant living in the property and one that's about to move into the property. You've got 2 paths of communication you need to keep going. Don't stop communicating with either of them. After they move out, you get all the keys back, do a final walkthrough. What are we doing during that walkthrough? Taking lots of pictures and video, right? We want to document how they left the property. Don't go in and start cleaning. Don't go in and do anything. First thing you do is turn the video camera on and take a bunch of pictures. If you want to do the walkthrough with the tenant, when they're fully out, you totally can. I don't do this for the same reason I don't do move-in walkthroughs. I'm going to go. I'm going to take pictures. If they think there's anything that's crazy that, last move out I had, he called me. He's like, they tore the vinyl flooring in the hallway. Like, I know I need to pay for that. I'm filing a claim with the company. And I was like, great, would you like me to wait for you to file the claim, or you want me to bill you and you handle it? He's like, just bill me and I'll take care of it with the company. I'm like, fantastic. Those are great tenants, right? People that come to you and tell you what's wrong. Let them know you're obviously going to give them their damage deposit, less any damages back. Take pictures and video like we talked about. Schedule any maintenance of work that you didn't already know you were going to need to do. You're probably going to see something and be like, oh, that screen has a hole in it. I need to fix that. Have a handyman who can come and deal with that. If it's tenant damaged, please take more pictures of it so that you have evidence. Get that thing rent ready as quickly as possible. You guys should be able to turn a property in at most 10 days. You should probably be able to turn it in about 6 hours if you're not doing paint and carpet, right? Cleaners, carpet cleaners, some light maintenance, you're done, right? You've already done as much as possible while the previous tenant's in there. This should be minimize your vacancy. When you're doing your deal analysis and you put 3% vacancy in there, you should be able to beat that in almost every case. Lots of damage, somebody leaves it a pit and does $40,000 worth of damage, that's not what we're talking about. But normal tenant turnover, you should be able to do it fairly quickly. Like I said, schedule all your other big items prior to the cleaning. You're obviously not going to have it cleaned and then go install carpet and paint, right? You want to do cleaning and carpet cleaning last. Already told you that. Move out time is noon. I think in the majority of my turns, even early on in my real estate career, it was they're out by noon and the next morning it was rented, right? And the tenant was moving in. So put the pressure on yourself. You can get it done. Repeat the move-in process with the next tenant that we covered at the beginning of this presentation. Damage deposit return. Got to give them their money back. What happens if we don't give them their money back in the allotted time? It's not double, it's more, just triple. It's treble damages. So you need to get this done. Are we Cub Scouting signs? You're saying it's...
Oh, wait, microphone.
Depends on what your lease says.
Agreed. It depends on what your lease says. However, the law states you have 7 days from the time that you have been notified that they have not received their deposit back to remedy the situation.
Yeah.
Before the triple damages hit.
Yeah. Don't put yourself in that position, right? You want to get this stuff done as fast as possible. 30 days in most cases is like, oh, that's a long time. But then you start thinking about, well, the tenant's going to move in. What are they going to find in 7 days that becomes attributable to the previous tenant? So you've got a week there that you know you're waiting. You've got utilities, which sometimes take a long time. Did they pay their final utility bill? Was it on auto pay? Is it getting paid in the 15th of the month, right? Calling the utility company a couple weeks after and being like, hey, was it paid? At some point, you need to take that money out of their damage deposit, pay the utility bill, which is never a bad idea if it's still unpaid. You can always reimburse the tenant if they actually paid it, right? Tell the utility company, great, I mailed you the check, mail it back to me. So if it's not returned in time, you could owe triple damages. Check that all utilities are paid. Like I said, if not, pay them yourself. Send them a final statement that details the changes. This should include invoices. So if you go into the property and you clean it yourself, how much are you charging? Zero, zero. Anybody charging? Wow, you guys want to come clean my house? They're charged free cleaners. I love it.
Yeah, we charge.
Do you clean it yourself?
I mean, it's in-house guys, but it's not like a third-party invoice to provide them.
You provide them a third-party invoice? Oh, yeah.
We just provide them that move-out statement showing what we did. We also give them up front like an estimated amount of what each thing is going to cost, and then we give them a link to the pictures of any of the damage, and we haven't had any problem with that.
Yep. So if you go to court and I don't know how your company's set up, so this may or may not apply to you. If you go to court and you did the work yourself, the court most likely will throw that out. Charging for your own time doesn't hold up in court very often. So might just want to hire cleaners and save yourself the time, right? Because you're like, oh, I can charge $50 an hour for my cleaning. Really, you can't. So a lot of people do it. A lot of people get away with it. But do have actual invoices, right? This basically says to the tenant, I'm being straight with you. Here's my invoice. Could you doctor invoices? Can the tenant doctor rent checks? Yes. This stuff happens too, I'm sure. Don't do that, right? Do it the right way. Talked about that. If you don't send an invoice, apparently you could actually also owe triple in damages for that non-returned portion of the funds. Mail the final statement and refund check to their forwarding address. If they owe money, give them a due date and tell them they need to respond in writing if they want to argue with you, right? Don't take the angry phone call until they've responded in writing. Is that how your property manager does, your company does it, Lashana? Writing? Yeah. So most property managers will require that person to write something so that they have documentation that says, I disagree with this point, this is why. And then the property manager can respond and say, here are the photos of the non-clean refrigerator that you say was cleaned. Here are the photos of the damage that you did to the doors. And I would note on here, hey, if this isn't paid within 60 days, whatever your timeline wants to be, this will be sent to the collection agency and will probably damage your credit score. Already talked about that. Here's what a very, very simplified move-out damage deposit invoice, I don't have the invoices on here, looks like. Here's what the original damage deposit was. Here's what was deducted per the lease agreement for carpet cleaning. Sprinkler damage, like I told you, they mowed 6 of them off. $190.50. And this tenant actually came to me when when they were moving out and said, hey, we really tried to take care of the yard. We didn't tell you this, but we bought some seed. We actually put some extra mulch down. Would you be willing to reimburse us for that? And I said, sure, provide me your receipt. And they provided me a receipt, so I credited them $31.06, right? Is that a lot of money? No. Did they ask for permission? No. Is it the right thing to do and have that goodwill move forward? I sure think so. So here's your total refund. Thanks for renting. Please call blah, blah, blah at this number if you have any questions. So very simple. And then the invoices for carpet cleaning and sprinkler damage would be attached. And I'd probably also attach a copy of the receipt just so everything was there. Super simple. So that's kind of the tenant move in and move out cycle. As I was thinking about this, there's other stuff that happens on a more calendar year cycle that I just wanted to have one slide on. And depending on your lease, right, the tenant is probably responsible for other stuff, right? Changing the furnace filters every month, right? We talked about checking that filter every time you do an inspection and you do a walkthrough, right? Don't forget to have your furnace and air conditioner serviced at least every other year, right? Most people will tell you every year. Mine gets serviced about every other year. So have that done. This is a reminder for you, taking care of your property as a property manager is still important. Sprinkler turn on and blowouts. How many of you guys have your tenants take care of this? Sprinklers, yard, blowing out the sprinklers, you blow out the lines so they don't freeze in the winter. Do you have sprinklers?
She's from New Mexico.
Oh, that explains it. Yes. So there's a big kind of debate. You may want to do this yourself. In my lease and the way I ran my single family homes and duplexes that had sprinkler systems was the tenant was responsible for paying for them to be turned on and paying for them to be blown out. My property manager violently disagrees with me on this because their stance is if the tenant does it and it's done wrong and it freezes, you're going to be paying for it. So they're like, we'd much rather pay the $50 and have it done right and know that it's done than have that issue, which is not a bad argument. Please don't forget to tell them when it becomes wintertime, you need to unhook your hoses from your spigots. If you would like to watch a spigot explode and spray water that then freezes into a path of ice in the backyard, which I have seen, this is one very easy way to have that happen. Yard care, mowing, weeding, and snow removal. In a lot of cases, this is single family home, this is the tenant's responsibility. In multifamily, it's probably yours. In an 8-unit apartment, who mows the yard? Like once every 8 weeks it's a different unit? No, it's not how it works. You're going to be responsible. But check this when you drive by, and like I said before, when it snows, go drive by, see if they're shoveling, right? See if they're putting salt or other things down that are actually going to damage your concrete that you specifically told them not to do in the lease, right? Take the kind of proactive stance. And then checking the smoke and CO2 detectors, you want to do this every time you walk through the property, but you want to get them in the habit of doing it too, right? Hey, have you checked that lately? maybe have them do it when you're doing your walkthrough. Hey, can you just test that one for me? Like, make sure you do that every month.
Hey, just for the recording, that should be CO.
Oh, yeah.
Not CO2.
Yes, it's a carbon dioxide detector. It's terrible. It's always going off. It drives me crazy. You have to tell your tenants not to breathe in order for that to be safe. Hopefully they have lots of plants just to convert it back. Yes, CO detector. Let's just, for fun, change it.
It'll be correct for the next presentation.
Yes, it's correct now. I don't know what you're talking about, James. Thank you. Yes. And then the last slide, right, we've talked about this a lot. Landlord-tenant relationship is super important. If you haven't gotten that from this, this is really important, right? Set expectations during your lease signing. Set expectations every time you do a walkthrough, but stick to them. If you can't, hire a property manager who can, right? There's really not a lot of room. You've lent them a $300,000 suitcase. If someone was like stealing $10,000 from that every month, would you just be like, oh, I like your sob story? No, you would be like, you're going to jail. So don't let that happen, right? You're stealing from me. Document, video, and photo everything. Build the trust and rapport with your tenants. Communication is what will drive that for you. If you don't communicate with your tenants, they won't have a relationship with you. They won't care when you call. They won't care if something's wrong. If you show them, hey, something's wrong, you tell me, I fix it, and it happens quickly, boom, you've just ratcheted up your communication, you've ratcheted up your rapport. Do that, it works wonders. Respond quickly. If they call you and you don't respond, that's crazy, right? Give them a phone number that you are going to answer. If you are out of town, give them a phone number they can call, that they can get a response from. Hey, I have a leak. The water's coming out from under the kitchens in my cabinet. What happens if you don't answer that phone call? Hopefully you've left very explicit instructions for your tenant of where the water turn-off valve is, what to do if there's a water leak while you're in Mexico, and how to handle it and how they're going to pay for it so that you can reimburse them when you get back. Right? There's a lot of stuff there. Handle the reasonable requests, but be firm but fair. Right? We want the tenants to have a great experience, but we also are running a business. Remain calm at all times, especially when they aren't calm. If you can't handle a tenant being mad at you in your face and remain calm, hire a property manager. Don't do it yourself, right? Somebody's eventually going to get mad at you in text, in email, on the phone, to your face. You've got to be able to just, I understand your situation. How are we going to work to resolve this for you? If you can't do that, hire a property manager. Like I said. And what will make this not happen very much, again, comes back to a couple weeks ago. Screen your tenants like your properties depend on it, because they do. And that is all I have. Any questions? So I'm going to answer the questions on the board, and then we'll take questions if there are any. How to minimize vacancy, I think we talked about that. I don't remember, you asked, right, Scott? Yep. So I think we got that one. And then upgrades and how much do they actually increase rent? Who, you guys asked this? So I think this is hard, right? So do you put a fence in for someone who has a dog, as an example, right? I actually did this and was able to charge fence rent. So I would suggest thinking outside the box.
That's exceptional, by the way. Don't think you can automatically.
Yes. But if you have a tenant that's like, hey, I really need a fence, and you're like, well, there's no fence there now, you know, it cost me this much, I can probably have that done if you're willing to pay an extra $50 a month. A lot of tenants might say yes to that, right, if they really want to live in the house. I think this goes, you know, are you going to get, you know, are you putting granite in your kitchen, right?
Countertops, like what?
Yep. So I did this on the second property I ever bought as a rental. And it was a brand new property, and I was like, I'm going to put granite in, stainless. I actually put hickory floors in it, in the front area. And James was like,
I told you not to.
You are insane. And I was like, whatever,
and
you
it looked
watch.
really nice. I almost wanted to move in.
It looks amazing, right? It's like the nicest looking thing. But I paid for it extra, right? Which in hindsight,
should have bought 10 of those.
Should have bought 10 of those and done that to all 10 of them, right? Or the whole neighborhood, whatever. But James will say, well, do you think you ever got that back? And I will say, I don't know if I've gotten it back all in rent, but that house still has the same tenant in it that it did when I put that tenant in it 6 years ago, right? They don't want to move, right? And so I'm like, there's definitely some longevity for the tenant there. But I think what also helped was when I was renting it, I hadn't even bought it yet and I had it rented, and it rented very quickly because people walk in and they're like, this is super nice, right? Like, you don't see a lot of rentals that are kind of that caliber. And so it rented quickly, it stayed rented, great tenant. And so I think there's, you know, non-dollar tangible stuff that is important to take into consideration. But if you're gonna, like, you know, go install, you know, all hardwoods in a 3,000 square foot, you know, house, I don't know if you're gonna see that back or not, right?
Yeah, I think you decrease your vacancy. I think you decrease maintenance a little tiny bit. Probably reduce CapEx a little bit with some of the higher quality stuff that you're gonna have for a longer period of time. And you might be able to get a small premium on rent if you've got a lot of competition and the market's really hot, but normally you're not getting that much more for a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Now, if you're in a different price point where it's expected, then I think you could hurt yourself by not doing it. So if you're in a $450,000 property
And you don't have solid surface countertops, you're
and the
probably hurting.
Exactly. Then you're actually going to have a harder time renting. So part of it is knowing what market you're in too.
Yeah. Yep.
Don't over improve your property for the neighborhood either. So if you're looking around your neighborhood and you look at your previous sales for the last 6 months or a year and you're seeing that almost all of them are not done, I would not do it.
Yeah.
Because you kind of want to take resale into account as well. It's not just the renting.
Yeah. Now, if it's ugly or, you know, old or whatever, right, I think that's a very different story. And, you know, a conversation I had with another investor before I came here tonight was, you know, hey, I have this house. I'm thinking about putting air conditioning in it. It's going to cost me $3,800. It rents for $1,400. Should I do it? And I was like, yes, right? Because currently there's only a window unit. And I'm like, that's super uncomfortable, right? And you may not get more rent for it because you're already advertising for it. So it's hard to, like, well, raise the price. But I said one way to do that is currently they're looking at it as it has a window unit in the living room, right? You tell them, hey, you know, we've thought about installing AC. You know, if we did that, you know, we'd probably wait until the next rent cycle when rent went up. Or would you be willing to pay an extra $50 a month? We'll put central air in.
And you can make the argument that it will reduce their utility costs too on some of these items.
Right. So you can make that argument, hey, maybe you'll save a little bit of money, but you're certainly going to be more comfortable. And I think the other benefit, even if they said no, you still may want to do it because it may increase their longevity of stay, right? Now they're not like, oh, we thought this window unit was going to be enough, but it's just, I'm dying, right? It's like as hot as it is in here. Yeah.
So on pets, do you do a non-refundable pet deposit, or do you do refundable pet deposit and pet rent?
So the way I do it, I definitely do pet rent. It's either $25 or $35 dollars per month per pet. Based on what? Yeah, why? How many pets? It's based on depending on whether they have already rented or not. So if they're in their current lease, I won't raise their pet rent. So if it's a renewal, it's still 25. If it's a new lease, it's 35. So pet deposit wise, I don't collect a separate pet deposit. What happens is I tell them it's an extra $300, half of it for 2 pets, right? Up to 2 pets. Half of that is non-refundable. So out of that 300, 150 is basically just a fee, right? The other 150 basically gets attached to their normal damage deposit so that it's not coined as pet deposit, right? So any damages that then occur in the property, their entire damage deposit can go against those.
And be careful about the language you use with pet fees versus pet deposit. A deposit is something you give back to people. So don't say it's a non-refundable pet deposit. You'll end up getting in trouble, especially in writing. You should always say pet fee if it's non-refundable, and you can use pet deposit if you plan on giving it back.
Yep. Any other questions? Yes.
What? Microphone?
What are your thoughts on radon mitigation systems if the tenant is asking for one?
So unless the tenant had it tested and they know for a fact that it's above 4 picoliters per whatever it is.
Picocuries per liter.
Yes, picocuries per liter. If it's above that, you should install it, in my opinion, because that's a dangerous health thing, and you would hate to have them come back with that. If they're just saying, hey, I think there's radon, right, that's a weird situation, right? It's kind of like someone saying, hey, I think there's, someone smoked meth in this property, right? Like, okay, well, what evidence do you have? So if you're buying a house, I would suggest you probably have a radon test done and negotiate upon purchase, hopefully the installation of a radon mitigation system. A lot of the builders, at least some of the builders, if you have the test done and pay for it and it comes back above 4, they'll install it. They'll retest it. If it's still above 4, they'll make it active because there's a passive and then an active with a fan, right? And then they'll retest it again to make sure it's under the limit.
That differs by builder.
Yes.
Some builders have that policy. Other ones will not. They just do their standard passive, and then you can go ahead and
stick a fan in it later. But yeah, it's hard. What's their reasoning for saying that they think there's radon?
The situation already happened. I just wanted your opinion on it. There was a passive system in the house. It was a 2012 build, but there was no fan. It was tested and it came back really high. And so we did have a fan installed, and then now there's a monitor on it and all that.
Okay.
So they're all very happy, but they were saying that they were starting to feel sick.
Oh, yeah. So I'll just give you another example that happened to me that's very similar. So most of the time when people see mold, their immediate reaction is, I'm going to die, and it's black mold, right? I've never in my life seen black mold. I got a call from a tenant in a brand new property, inherited tenant, and they were like, everything was good, and then one day they called and they're like, I lifted up the rug in the bathroom and there's definitely mold underneath the linoleum and it's peeling up and it's black mold. And that's what they told me. And I was like, all right, fair enough. I'm gonna come look. I'm gonna be there in 3 minutes because it happens to be very close to me. And I drove over and I walked in the bathroom and the whole story didn't really make a lot of sense. It seems like they should have found it earlier, but whatever. There was definitely a water leak in the bathroom from the toilet or something, and there was definitely mold on the underside, right? I lifted it up, I looked at it. I'm no expert, right? It's mold, it's the color black. That doesn't mean it's black mold, as people would say. So I sit down, I talk to them, and they're basically right to hey, can we break our lease? And I was like, is there any other reason that you're wanting to move, right? Because I don't know if that's black mold. Most mold is not, caught. We'll take care of it. We'll clean it, and it'll be mitigated. But and then they're like, well, he's been feeling, ill for, a month and had headaches and been to the doctor. He's on medicine and they can't figure it out. And I'm like, well, you could have told me that before. Oh my gosh. So I immediately that day they basically brought the guy that does the air test out. And I was like, do the air test. Sure enough, it was black mold. I was like, well, that's interesting, right? I guess I've seen black mold now. And so they sealed off the bathroom. I had it fully mitigated by a professional. They reran the air test. Everything was clean. And they still were like, we just don't feel well still. What can we do? And I was like, if you guys want to move out, I won't charge you the lease breakage fee, right? Because I don't care. Right? I want them to feel healthy and safe, right? And they're clearly expressing, hey, I don't feel good, right? And I'm like, then great, move out. And they're like, we don't want any trouble. We need to move. And even if even if it's just in our heads, it doesn't matter. It's real to us. And it's great. And so they ended up moving out, replaced it with another tenant, right? Fully mitigated, air test, disclosed to the next tenant, and no problems. But I think that's the right thing to do as a landlord, and that builds whatever you want to call it, rapport, karma down the road. You've done the right thing, continue to do the right thing. It's not, oh, you're breaking your lease, I'm going to charge you and you have to stay here for 60 days, and then they get really sick and then they sue you and you lose the property. That's not worth it either. So be compassionate on actual stories that are real.
In this case, the guy died 6 months, so there's no lawsuit pending or anything.
No, the guy did not die. He's totally fine, doing very well.
Because he moved out.
Yeah. Yeah, it was James.
It was not me. If somebody gives you a hard time about that, I don't know. My take on it is, why try to force someone to stay in your property?
Right.
The market's hot enough.
How well is that going to go?
Yeah, just the market's hot enough. Find a replacement.
Yeah.
You want people that want your stuff.
Yeah, you want somebody to damage your property? Force them to stay, right? Oh, there's mold? Yeah, just live here. Yeah, it's not going to
Regarding
work.
the black mold Stachybotrys, it can be really, really bad, and for everybody
Yes.
it can be different. It can affect them mentally,
Yep.
physically, emotionally.
Yes. I'm not saying that black mold is
so
not
what you did
dangerous.
was good.
Yeah.
Don't-
Well, as soon as I went and saw the mold, yeah, I mean, as soon as I saw that there was mold and they were like, we don't feel well, I was like, an air test, and they were literally there 2 hours later doing the air test. And then it was sealed. Yes, don't clean mold yourself. Yeah. Question here, too.
Oh, 8 questions.
Have you ever had a incident happen to you where you had multi-units and one tenant complained that they didn't feel safe around the other tenant?
Definitely happens. One of the clauses in the lease is quiet enjoyment. So every tenant in the building has the right to quiet enjoyment. So I have had situations that are similar where it's just some tenants are very disruptive and loud to the others. And it's been in some cases where the previous leases had no rules in them. So what happened was rules got posted publicly. They were mailed to all of the tenants, and then violations started to be issued based on occurrences. And then once a certain number of occurrences had kind of gone up, then you could actually do something about it. So if it's ever a life, like you ever feel threatened, and someone's calling you, I am always like, do not call me if you feel threatened. The number that you dial is 911, right? I'm not gonna like be there to protect you. That is what the police are for. So call 911 and report it to them, right? And then, please call me and let me know as well, but the police need to handle it if it's anything related to a criminal harassment type situation.
And I think the city has a mediation, or like almost a free mediation service where they will try to work out tenant disputes as well.
Tenant landlord ones.
I thought it was
I don't know
actually
if it's
between
tenant,
tenants
tenant.
as well.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Oh, wait, what question?
Back across.
I know this might be for next week, too. How do you decide what damages a tenant has to pay on move-out for things like water damage that was clearly they should have known or let you know about it before? Or your grass being completely torn up by the dogs? Or
That's an easy one. That's damage done by the tenant or their animal. Water leaks, it's, if there's water, coming out from underneath the cabinets and they don't call you, it's definitely going to be their issue. But it's really case by case. It's hard, right? You have to look at it. You have to think about, imagine standing in front of a judge, right? For me, it'd be really easy to say, they saw water coming out from underneath their cabinets and they didn't call me. 60 days went by and now my house is filled with mold. That's why I billed them $10,000 for mold mitigation, right? Now if it's, hey, there was a leak underneath their bathroom sink that's hardly ever used and it was a drip leak, but it actually ran down the wall and came out the ceiling in the garage, you're probably paying for that, right? That's not a, I think, reasonable thing. I think it also depends on what your lease says, so. Yeah, but it doesn't take long for water damage to get behind and in stuff, and that's the problem, right? You have to cut drywall out, and then you gotta replace the drywall, dry it out. That's all, that cost just adds up so fast. So, yeah, as an example, I had a boiler, hot water boiler pipe explode in a unit that was a multifamily that was on the second floor. The tenant had left the window open on a freezing night, and so the boiler repair person that came and took care of it basically said, this is the tenant's fault. They left the window open, it froze the pipe, caused it to burst, and the tenant was like, it was hot, so we just, opened the window a little bit, and, you couldn't bill them, right? It was very difficult to prove in that case. So that ended up being an insurance claim and was like $12,000 to fix because the water just leaks everywhere. Question in the back? Nope. He's just like, when does class end? Yeah. Perfect. We'll stick around for the class after the class. If you have more questions, James and I will be around. Otherwise, thanks for coming, and we will see you next week for solving tenant challenges.